In 22 BBY, on the outer rim world of Geonosis, Count Dooku, leader of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, would, along with his allies, combine forces to assemble the largest droid army the galaxy had ever known. The Galactic Republic's corrupt bureaucracy, sycophantic politicians and lack of care towards the neglected Outer Rim had cleared his path to power. War would engulf his 4-year reign. A manufactured conflict to fulfill the flawed destiny of one man, leaving billions dead and a galaxy in terror. After Obi-Wan Kenobi had discovered this meeting of the Separatist Executive Council, he contacted the Jedi Council on Coruscant, but was quickly apprehended by Dooku's forces. The Senator of Naboo, Padme Amidala, and Obi-Wan's Padawan Anakin Skywalker would attempt a rescue, but also became prisoners. Facing the execution of the three of them, Jedi Master Mace Windu led a strike team of 212 Jedi to rescue them. Meanwhile, Grandmaster Yoda had arrived on Kamino to see for himself the clone army ordered in secret for the Republic. Windu's surprise attack initially went well, but with the deployment of thousands of battle droids, the Jedi strike team was cut down to almost a man. But then, from above, the clone army arrived, some 300,000 in all, and thus commenced the first battle of Geonosis. The invasion force would land at several pre-scouted assembly areas to the west of the Geonosian Arena. As well as the infantry units, each clone corps contained many armoured and specialised units. For the Battle of Geonosis, the clones basically took everything they had from Kamino, which is why we see so many ATTEs and other expensive vehicles. Remember, at the start of the war, no one knew how long it would last, so there was no point in holding back. Well, I guess one person knew. This complement would total over 2,000 ATTEs, 100 SPHAT artillery units, 1,500 LAATs with an extra 400 LAAT carrier variants, along with the prototype variant of the TX-130 Sabre tanks, all packed into 12 Accolade-class assault ships. In comparison, the droid army numbered over 1 million deployed B-1 battle droids, with millions in reserve, 100,000 B-2 super battle droids, 3,000 droidicas, 15,000 dwarf spider droids, 7,500 homing spider droids, 4,000 hailfire droid tanks, and tens of thousands of other assorted Separatist coalition droids and vehicles. The enormous clone army would land in a rough line north to south, creating a formidable wall of advancing armour and infantry, with well-reinforced units on each far side to avoid a flanking attack by the Separatists. The 327th Star Corps under Marshal Commander Bly would be present almost in its entirety, as well as units from the 416th Star Corps, with other attached units such as elements of the 501st Legion, and the 127th Gunship Wing, providing much of the gunship support. The Clone Army command would be stationed just behind the line in the middle of the advance. From this point, Commander 71 was able to observe, reroute, and help direct the battle. Note that 71 was only a battalion commander. He was not in charge of the army, just the forward command post from where he was tasked with directing his fellow commanders. Near the command post were positioned the SPHAT artillery units. Some units would advance further than others, due to the uneven terrain. This shortcoming in the initial plan was proved devastatingly true, when Commander Bly's 327th Star Corps, 7th Legion, 101st Regiment, Advance Guard, Hawkback Battalion, under the command of Major 12, was nearly surrounded. Without any support from flanking clone battalions, almost all of Hawkback Battalion was wiped out. Captain Tito and all of Bacta Company were destroyed altogether. However, Captain Devis leading K Company managed to survive by hiding in a shell hole as the droids continued to swarm over him. He lay there keeping his injured clones alive, until after 3 hours he was rescued by advancing Republic forces. This was not an uncommon story along the enormous advancing front. Units were overrun, outflanked, and left unsupported. The Republic would learn many hard lessons from Geonosis, and this was certainly one of them. The relentless speed of the Republic advance was heavily dependent on their use of LAAT gunships. At this stage of the war, the Separatists did not have effective gunships or potent anti-aircraft capability, so the LAATs had full reign over the battlefield, completing constant sorties over the Separatist lines. They were particularly useful in eliminating the Hellfire droids. The LAAT supremacy would also be helped in part by many commando raids on a small number of Geonosian anti-aircraft sites. As the clone advance got nearer to the giant Separatist core ships, Grandmaster Yoda ordered Commander 71 to focus the SPHAT's fire on them. A total of 4 million droids stored within the core ships would be destroyed, thanks to this intervention. It was not long after reports started coming back to the forward command posts about how some clone units had already reached the Geonosian catacombs. Realizing their situation, the Separatists ordered a general retreat. They would hide millions of droids in the catacombs, ready to strike the occupation force when the best time arose.
With the ground battle on Geonosis concluded, the Republic could move many units out to the new frontiers forming across the galaxy. They would subsequently split the galaxy into 20 sectors, each garrisoned by a sector army of 170,000 clones. The clones on the frontiers were there to assist local planetary defense forces, who had remained loyal to the Republic. The clones in the core world were to be used as a rapid reaction force, to be sent out to plug gaps and fight in highly intensive campaigns. This map shows some of the known units and where they were based. Equally, the Republic Navy crewed by clones, but commanded at the higher ranks by officers of the non-clone Naval Corps, the remnants of the old Republic military. It was stationed across the sectors as well, but it had many fleets that saw service throughout the galaxy. By far the most famous was the Open Circle Armada. Its most notable subunit was the 5th Fleet, led by Jedi General Obi-Wan Kenobi and Fleet Admiral Wolf Yularen. With the conclusion of Geonosis, many smaller battles began to spring up on worlds throughout the frontiers. There were also many hit-and-run attacks by the Separatists against unguarded supply convoys, including above Saleucami, losing thousands of clones. To the south, what was initially a scouting mission by Mace Windu would turn into an unexpected liberation of Hisrich from Separatist Commander ADW4, a rare Republic victory in these first few weeks of the war. Meanwhile, on Hebek Minor, the Republic would lay siege to a droid army numbering in the thousands, with General Savard and Commander Styx ultimately claiming victory. But 22 BBY would not be the clear-cut war many had assumed it to be for the Republic. A bombing in the capital city of Cato Nemoidia took the lives of 3,000 civilians, with neither the Republic nor Confederacy claiming responsibility. Cato Nemoidia remained neutral. On Arantara, the elite 501st Legion would see its first major combat since Geonosis. Captain Rex leading his men from the front into the droid lines, becoming seriously wounded during the fight, only surviving due to General Skywalker's rescue. This event would be the first time both had worked together, and they both found new respect for each other's abilities. The 501st would swiftly move to Bangalore to scout for separatist movements, but all they found was some fearsome local fauna. In the same sector, General Plo Koon and Commander Wolf would destroy one of Watchan Bor's floating cities. Wolf noted this as the first sighting of D1 series aerial battle droids. On Calaban, General Obi-Wan Kenobi would face his first battle with the Supreme Marshal Commander of the Separatists Droid Armies, General Grievous, and although not defeating him, Kenobi and his 212th Attack Battalion were able to escape. This trend of clearing up the many Separatist hit-and-run attacks in this small area of the Outer Rim would continue as the 501st left Bangalore and landed on Hissin. Here, they were besieged by Count Dooku and his apprentice assassin, Asajj Ventress, the 501st ultimately claiming victory. General Skywalker would briefly leave Rex in command of the 501st, while he left to deal with conflict in the Corvair sector. At Corvair itself, and neighbouring Kudo 3, resulting in the sector being freed from the grips of the Separatists. But the 501st's engagement so far with the droid army had been pretty limited, but that was all about to change with the Cristophsis campaign. With so many defeats, Dooku looked to the great hyperspace lanes to make a breakthrough and seriously threatened the Republic's grip on the southern outer rim. His target, the Corellian Run, the most important artery to get materials back to the core worlds and send supplies to the isolated clones further afield. Dooku put such faith in this campaign that he assigned Admiral Trench, the Confederacy's greatest naval commander, who had faced Republic forces 13 years earlier during the Battle of Malastare. The ground forces needed to secure the planet's capital city would be led by General Florrum. The small band of clones on the ground from the 13th Sector Army, along with their allies in the Cristophsis militia, proved little threat to Losum's forces. Alderaan Senator Bail Organa, who was on Cristophsis to deliver humanitarian aid to its people, urgently requested reinforcements from Coruscant to stop the droid armies taking the whole planet. Republic High Command turned to its available rapid reaction forces stationed in the core worlds. Based in the 5th and 6th sectors was the 3rd Systems Army, led by General Kenobi. He would assemble elements of his 7th Sky Corps, mainly consisting of his 212th Attack Battalion, with a second in command, Marshal Commander Cody. Within the 3rd Systems Army was also the 501st Legion, so whatever available battalions of General Skywalker and Captain Rex's Legion was attached to this strike force. The Navy's contribution would consist of 7 Venator-class Star Destroyers and 5 Acclamators. And despite Trench's best efforts, Skywalker and Commander Blackout's stealth bombing run on his capital ship, the Invincible, created a wedge through the line to get troops in, but there was no time to get comfortable. Within the hour of landing, they would attack. The initial Republic plan is to ambush a Separatist column as it advances along the long, straight road heading through the capital city to the city's central plaza. Kenobi and Cody took units of the 212th Attack Battalion to the South Tower, overlooking the main road, while Skywalker and Rex took the North Tower. They both had their respective clone units, with troops left to guard the artillery and landing site at the plaza. The two groups would occupy the higher levels of the buildings to get a better view of the oncoming droid column. In the South Tower, Kenobi and Cody would position the 212th with E-Web heavy repeater blaster cannons to rain fire down on the droids once they came into range, while Skywalker and Rex followed suit in the North Tower. But before the enemy column was in range, disaster struck. Because Kenobi's forces were stationed in the highest levels, they had no warning of the droid's surprise attack from the bottom of the building. With access to the turbo lifts denied due to the overwhelming droid advance, the 212th had to retreat through the building, but help was on the way. Seeing the carnage from the North Tower, Skywalker ordered clone pilot Hawk to prepare for an evacuation from the top of the South Tower, before ordering Captain Rex to use the clones as grappling hooks as zip lines to quickly race to Kenobi's aid. They reached Kenobi's position and managed to evacuate from the roof of the building. The small team of remaining clones then headed back to the newly established Republic base camp near the central plaza. Following their return to base, the clones found out that Sergeant Slick, one of Cody's squad leaders, was a traitor and was feeding intel to the Separatists. During his attempted escape, Slick managed to destroy much of the clones' heavy armor and artillery, but the clones managed to salvage the AV-7 anti-vehicle artillery cannons, positioning them strategically to counter an impending Separatist assault. General Loathsome led a formidable droid army, including B-1 and B-2 battle droids, Octupa tri-droids, and AATs, in a full frontal assault. Kenobi and Cody prepared for a direct charge against the advancing droids, while Skywalker and Rex utilized jetpacks to swiftly eliminate the towering Octupa droids. Thankfully, the AV-7 cannons were spared earlier, and so they were able to be used on the tightly ranked droid column. This forced General Loathsome to regroup and pull back. Amidst the chaos, Admiral Yularen dispatched Padawan Ahsoka Tano to the planet's surface with crucial orders from the Jedi High Council, as a communications blackout had severed contact with the Jedi Temple. Tano's arrival brought unexpected news to Skywalker that she had been assigned as his Padawan, a revelation that left him both surprised and apprehensive. The Jedi managed to establish a brief communication with Yoda, requesting urgent reinforcements. However, the Irresolute, under heavy fire from Separatist forces, was forced to withdraw, stranding the Jedi on Cristophsis with limited resources and a strengthened Separatist army. As the Separatists advanced under the protection of their deflector shield, Skywalker, Tano, Kenobi and Rex formulated a daring plan
to infiltrate and dismantle the shield generator. Skywalker and Tano stealthily navigated through enemy lines, planting explosives on the generator, while Kenobi and Rex defended their position against overwhelming odds. They were slowly pushed back through the buildings until Kenobi ordered Rex to go back and make a last stand at the artillery cannons, while he offered himself up for surrender. Kenobi's capture by the Separatists added a layer of tension, but his tactical stalling brought crucial time for Skywalker and Tano to complete their mission. The successful destruction of the shield generator turned the tide of the battle, exposing the droid forces to the full might of the Republic's artillery. Reinforcements arrived in the nick of time, led by Admiral Yularen and Master Yoda, who brought a revitalized fleet of Venator-class Star Destroyers and Acclamator-class assault ships. The Republic forces, now bolstered by fresh troops and firepower, launched a decisive counterattack, forcing the Separatist Armada to retreat. The combined efforts of the Jedi, clone troopers, and the newly arrived reinforcements secured a hard-fought victory on Cristophsis.
With Cristophsis firmly back in Republic hands, Dooku had to look at other ways to hit the Republic. He put into motion a plan to kidnap Jabba the Hutt's son, Rotter, and then hide him on the planet Teth. The Huttling will be used as a ploy to bait in the Republic, to frame them into looking like they are stealing the Huttling. If it worked, Dooku would be able to get the Hutt on his side. A single acclamator departed from Cristophsis, led by Skywalker, Tano, and Captain Rex, along with his most elite company from the 501st Legion. Torrent Company will attack in 4 LAATs, with 2 ATTEs being dropped in on the carriers. They will be facing 2 battalions of B1s, B2s, and Dwarf Spider Droids, 1,568 in all. Torrent Company would be facing an enemy that outnumbers them 10-1. The Separatists had very unusually made a good strategic move by only defending the pillar on which the monastery sits, and using the Dwarf Spider Droids as artillery. But for the Republic, the situation was not so rosy. As they approached the monastery, they came under a hail of flak fire from the Spider Droids, and with the fire so heavy, they couldn't land on the pillar itself. So Skywalker has to order the force to land at the base of the pillar. The droids must have thought the battle was over before it had even started. How could the Republic move an entire company of clones up a cliff face under fire? But the clones had a trick up their sleeves. As they approached the landing zone, they checked their weapons and comms before rushing out under the withering fire. The droids had positioned the spider droids onto a cliff itself, battering the clones as they scrambled for cover. The ATTEs took the biggest blows, but their heavy armor held firm. Captain Rex holstered his trusty DC-17s, instead opting to go with a pair of DC-15s. Not something the Mandalorian instructors on Kamino would advise, but the captain knew that such stunts were a surefire way to inspire the men. Knowing that the Jedi can find their own way up the cliff, Rex orders Torrent Company to fire their ascension cables, which would allow them to slowly climb. Meanwhile, the ATTEs began the dangerous and relatively unproven tactic of vertically climbing the cliffs, using the magnetized traction pads in each of its 6 feet. With this angle covering the top of the pillar, they could fire their mass driver cannons directly at the source of the incoming fire. But with the walkers being the largest targets, they continued to take heavy fire, until a lucky shot from a spider droid took out one of them. Despite the significant setback of losing 28 clones when the walker went down, Rex had made good ground before leading the way up the cliff, having to battle spider droids along the way. Skywalker would be the first to make it to the top, commandeering a droid stab speeder to make it. He would be immediately surrounded by droids. Despite destroying them, he was then set upon by droidicas, but just in time Ahsoka and the one remaining walker arrived, blasting them away, with Rex and the rest of the Torrent Company making it up safely. Upon mopping up the last of the droids on a landing pad, the team would move into the monastery itself. Skywalker and Tano would head into the prison level down below to try and find Jabba's son, while Rex and Torrent Company stayed up top. Despite some stray droids following them throughout the corridors, the pair managed to find the Huttling and join up with Rex in the courtyard. There they were able to communicate with Jedi General Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is en route with a Venator to pick them up and deliver Jabba's son back to Tatooine. He is assisted by his exceptional
optional Marshal Commander Cody, while the Venator is captained by Fleet Admiral Florrum. Such is the importance of the mission. But Kenobi would not be the first to reach Teth. That would be the Separatists, with a squadron of Vulture droids thundering in and providing cover for a C-9979 lander. The clones would mount a defense, but with no anti-air fire, they were sitting ducks and forced to retreat into the monastery. The Hutling was becoming more and more unwell, and Skywalker didn't know how long Kenobi would be, so he told Rex to hold the main door while he and Ahsoka looked for another way out. All Rex had was a couple of platoons and his company sergeant to hold out with, and more bad news for Rex was on the other side of that door. Ventress, Count Dooku's apprentice, had arrived and had just found a way to open it. Their blasters aimed at the door, the clones put up a stubborn defense, but ultimately having to surrender to Ventress's droid forces. Rex himself had been knocked unconscious, but waking up in a haze, he saw a perfect shot at shooting Ventress. Raising his DC-17, it would have been a direct headshot, but Ventress force-pulled B-1 to block the blaster bolt. Rex refused to answer her question, so he was force mind-tricked into calling Skywalker and asking for his location. But not being weak-minded, Rex manipulated the situation, calling the Jedi General by his first name, tipping off Skywalker. The clones were then held prisoner in the courtyard, and although they managed to take the droids' own weapons off them, and then take cover behind a destroyed AT-TE, they were trapped under siege in the courtyard and forced to hold out, hoping that reinforcements were on the way. With Rex being besieged in the monastery's courtyard and Skywalker having to find an alternative way of extracting Jabba's son, the situation did not look good for the Republic, but help was right around the corner. Kenobi's Venator finally arrived in the system. He and Commander Oddball had launched a squadron of fighters to provide support while Commander Cody prepared the gunships for ground assault. The fighters arrived just in time to save Rex from certain death, beating back the incoming waves of battle droids. Kenobi would leap from his fighter to join the surviving clones on the ground, with Cody soon following suit and leaping from his gunship to reinforce Rex. It would not be a quick end to the battle, but the clone reinforcements from the 212th Attack Battalion would certainly turn the tide and allow for a Republic victory on Teth. And as for Jabba's son, he would be returned to Tatooine by Skywalker on an old beat-up spice freighter. And although the Hutts didn't join the war against the Separatists, this small win ensured they remained neutral and crucially allowed for Republic transports to move throughout Hutt space. For the 501st Torrent Company, the victory on Teth would make way for some well-deserved rest after a long campaign, starting months earlier on Cristophsis. And for their captain, it would mark another successful battle, allowing him to demonstrate the elite capabilities of his 501st Legion. But 22 BBY would not be the last time Rex would wind up on Teth. With Jabba reunited with his son, it was quickly found that Ziro the Hutt had conspired with Dooku to kidnap Rotta. The Coruscant Guard swiftly raided Ziro's palace on Coruscant, taking them into custody, and despite a small rest for the Republic Navy, it wouldn't be long before they suffered a major defeat, with a surprise attack on the Twi'lek homeworld of Ryloth. With 6 Munificent-class frigates and a Lucrehulk, the Techno-Union would take centre stage. Wat Tambor and Martuk smashed through the tiny Republic fleet stationed over Ryloth, revealing the sad and evident truth that the Republic Navy was severely overstretched. Admiral Dow's ships managed a few ragged volleys before being overwhelmed and destroyed. That left Jedi General Umagan Dai and his second-in-command, Captain Keeley, all alone. They were part of the Republic's local Outer Rim garrison of the 14th Sector Army. The 14th was 170,000 strong, but its garrison duties were vast. And, like the Republic Navy, it was stretched to breaking point. The garrison, which was no larger than a battalion, was forced to watch as dozens of C-9979 landers came down and deployed thousands of droids. The Republic's forces were simply too few to mount a successful defense. Unlike on Cristophsis months earlier, the Separatists weren't taking any chances. General D and Keeley would have the support of Cham Syndulla's Twi'lek fighters, but his main concern was the safety of his people, not glory for the clone army. So the Republic was forced back and back into the canyons of Ryloth, a winding maze-like formation of mountains that connected many of its population centres. D decided that this was where the clones would make their stand. So fierce was the droids' advance that the Republic only had time to dig some basic trenches and scrape together a couple of AT-TEs, but with his left flank dissolving fast, General D needed a radical action to halt their advance. He and Keeley would order the only surviving LA-80 gunship to be positioned at a small choke point in the canyon, laced with every explosive they could find. With the trap set, the clones retreated to a safe distance. When the first droids were in range, they detonated the gunship, causing a complete collapse of the surrounding canyon. This avenue attack was now blocked for the droids. They would have to find another way around. For the clones, it would spare them a few needed hours at most, but it crucially allowed the Twi'leks to escape across a much narrower mountain pass in relative safety. But their survival would come at a grave cost to the Republic, because for the clones there was no escape. As the droids amassed just out of the clones' range to the north, they stacked their ranks with B1s, B2s and A80s. In such a small space, the droid tactic of marching shoulder to shoulder would prove, for once, to be undefeatable. With only one intact clone company left, Captain Keeley took his place at the front of the clone lines. As the droids came into view, the two sides traded broadsides. In such a confined area, it was hard to miss. Keeley kept up the fighting spirit of his men with a constant blasting of his dual DC-17s, a popular choice for skilled frontline officers. But as the droids got closer and closer, that skill would count for nothing. The odds were never in the clones' favour, and their outcome was always sealed. Despite a heroic last stand, with Keeley even getting back up after being knocked unconscious, both General D and his clone captain would be surrounded and cut down. But their sacrifice would not be in vain. The Twi'leks had managed to escape far into the wastelands of Ryloth, from where they mounted a guerrilla war against the Separatist occupiers. But, for now, Ryloth would remain under the thumb of Wat Tambor, and the majority of its Twi'lek population would be subject to the Droid Army's subjugation. And while the Republic would secure a small victory on Toydaria, it was still looking for a large-scale victory win. But soon a much more immediate threat would reveal itself. Republic intelligence was tracking a Separatist fleet. It had already destroyed 3 Venators in the Fu system, and so Jedi General Plo Koon, Commander Wolf and the 104th Attack Battalion were dispatched to intercept it. But upon arrival at Abrigado, it was obvious that this was no ordinary fleet, but a single ship, Malevolence. On board, Dooku and Grievous in person. The Republic fleet was ripped apart, the vast majority of the 104th going down with it. And despite the few survivors being rescued, the Malevolence was now on the hunt against unguarded Republic convoys, destroying a medical convoy near Naboo, and then setting course for the Republic's secret medical installation near the Khalida Nebula. The station was treating 60,000 wounded clone troopers. If it was destroyed by the Separatists, it would be the greatest disaster of the war so far. Fortunately, a bombing run from General Skywalker was able to destroy its primary ion weapons, and ultimately led to its destruction, turning probable Republic defeat into a decisive victory. The Separatists would never send any Subjugator-class heavy cruisers into combat again. Their price too high for such a short lifespan. The Malevolence campaign would prove the most consequential for the 104th, Wolf changing the unit's armour colour to grey in memory of the hundreds of 104th troopers killed. Following the cleanup of the Malevolence campaign, parts of the 501st were briefly sent to Mimban. Despite their short stay on the muddy swamp of a planet, Mimban would remain in a state of war for decades to come. The mud jumpers of the 224th Division would continue to be stationed there for the rest of the war. Luckily for Rex, he and Cody would be given some respite from the front lines, and sent around the Abrian sector to inspect the many tracking stations defending Kamino. Republic High Command thought it not entirely implausible that Grievous might just try to bulldoze his way through to Kamino, and although they didn't know it yet, their suspicions were correct. Grievous planned to capture a tiny outpost on one of Rishi's moons, to sneak past the tracking stations and hit Kamino. The outpost was only manned by a squad of clones, and they had no idea what was heading their way. The single squad of clones was led by Sergeant 09er, an experienced NCO evident by his greying hair and battle-scarred armour, clearly having seen much combat in these first few months of the Clone Wars. Despite the dullness of his posting on the outpost, he knew the strategic importance of the location for the Republic. His new troops, on the other hand, were not so keen to be there. 5 of his new troopers were from the same clone cadet squad,
Domino Squad. 5 of them, along with the many other clones at this early stage of the war, were pushed out into conflict zones before their training was entirely finished. Such was the urgency of the start of the Clone Wars. Despite the dull and relaxed nature of the posting, Niner demanded high standards from his fresh troops, and with Marshal Commander Cody and Captain Rex en route for a standard routine inspection, he wanted to make sure the outpost was operating at peak efficiency. And being the professional, Niner had ensured that one of his more experienced troopers was assigned as a deck officer to watch over the landing pad and look out for incoming ships. But as a meteor shower rained down, a common occurrence in this area of wild space, the clones hadn't spotted the hidden droid dropships landing nearby, loaded with the Separatists' newest droid model, the highly capable and extremely lethal commando droids. They swiftly climbed onto the landing pad, killed the deck officer, and gained entry to the outpost. The sergeant was first to react, grabbing his DC-15A, but with no cover in the narrow corridor he was cut down and killed. The clones inside jammed the doors closed and managed to make it to the air vent that led outside, but with the clones gone, the outpost was in Separatist hands, and more importantly, the all-clear signal was now secured, meaning the Republic had no idea the droids were coming, but help was on the way. On the other side of the Abrian sector, Cody and Rex had just finished inspecting a tracking station on Pastille. Next on their list was the Rishi outpost. This was all part of a string of inspections along this part of the Outer Rim, and it was a nice change of pace for the two officers. Rex had recently seen action on the muddy hellhole of Mimban, and both of them had led key roles in the Cristophsis campaign. But as they entered the Rishi system, the clone on the other end of the line seemed a bit off. And upon landing there was no sign of a deck officer. The clone who did emerge was erratic and confused, but from behind came a red droid attack flare. Rex shot the clone dead. Despite Cody's concern, Rex was right too, it was a commando droid. No sooner could he confirm his suspicions, and they came under siege with their backs to the wall. But with a fighting retreat they were able to repel the landing pad into the gorge before the droid's detonators went off. At the bottom they found 3 clones, but they weren't taking any chances, ordering them to show their faces to prove who they were. As they did, one of Rishi's giant eels attacked, but the ARC-trained Jedi's recipient wasn't phased and took it out with a single shot to the eye. But despite their momentary safety, they still had to find a way back into the outpost. Worse still, they were now against a clock. The droids had hardwired the all-clear signal, so even though the outpost was not in Republic hands, no one outside of Rishi knew. Despite Cody's concern, Rex devised a cunning plan. He would walk up to the front blast door, pretend to be a commando droid and have the door opened for him, and to everyone's surprise, it worked. With the other clones supporting the officers as they charged up the ramp towards the control room, they made quick work of the small number of commando droids, Rex making it clear to the shinies that he always goes in first. They quickly made it to the control room, Rex being disarmed by a commando droid and managing to defeat it in melee combat. But ultimately the small band of droids was easily dispatched by the clones. This was when they realised that the all-clear signal was hardwired, and even worse, there was a new problem on the horizon. As the clones looked out of their observation deck, they could see a C-9979 lander coming down as reinforcements. Grevious was taking no chances in ensuring the outpost remained under droid control. The C-9979 was capable of holding up to 2,500 droids, and that's odds of 500 to 1. Rex, acting quickly, decided that the base must be destroyed. It would be the only way to alert the Republic of the CIS's presence. They decided to use liquid tabana, a highly explosive fuel and energy source. Stored inside power droids, it could be positioned and rigged to blow up the entire station. While Rex got plan into motion, Cody set about assembling a defense of their position to buy Rex as much time as possible, heavy picking his trusty D6 rotary cannon, and Cody going for his DC-15. They held the line at the front blast door long enough for Rex to get the tabana into position, but as Cody retreated back to Rex's position, he couldn't get the detonator connected. Heavy told the rest to make their escape and that he would catch up after fixing the problem, but with the droids approaching fast and the detonator still not connecting, Heavy grabbed his E6 and retreated behind the corner. As the B1 reinforcements recaptured the outpost, Heavy made one last effort at driving them out, killing dozens single-handedly and throwing his blaster at them when it had overheated before being shot to the floor. He was able to detonate the tabana, sacrificing himself to destroy the station and alert the Republic. With the all-clear signal no longer being transmitted, the Republic fleet hyperspaced in, and with their firepower superiority forced Grievous's fleet to retreat. saving Kamino from invasion. Despite Heavy's death, Echo and Fives would be admitted into the 501st Legion. Grievous would regain some of the initiative with a tactical naval victory over the Republic at Fourleen, but his next target, Bothawai, home of the Bothans and their invaluable intelligence network, would be a different kind of quarry. Skywalker's small fleet of 3 Venators was tasked with defending the Bothawai system, positioning his ships behind the planet's asteroid ring. Grievous had a numerical advantage, but the asteroids posed a real problem. If they went above, their weak underside would be exposed to the Venator's fire. If they went below, most of their turbo lasers would have no line of sight, so he sent his fleet straight down the middle, through the asteroids. It was looking bad for Skywalker, as he sent out his Gold Squadron to distract Grievous. But he had a plan for Grievous's move, putting Captain Rex and the Venator's ATTE complement on the asteroids, able to fire into the Munificence. And after claiming victory, Skywalker broke off to chase Grievous in his starfighter, but one of his engines caught fire. And in the ensuing chaos, R2-D2 went missing, only regaining the droid from a Separatist facility in the Rusan system. The last engagement for any elements of the clone army in 22 BBY would be the capture of the Separatist Council member Nute Gunray on Rhodia, carried out by Commander Gree and his Green Company, but his fate stretches well into 21 BBY. Although the Republic had pulled off a great coup with the capture of Nute Gunray at the tail end of 22 BBY, forces outside their control had already started planning for his escape. Aboard the Tranquility, the capital ship of Jedi General Luminara Unduli and Marshal Commander Gree's 9th Assault Corps, Gunray was being held as a prisoner. But a separatist operation led by Asajj Ventress and aided by a 5th columnist inside the Senate Guard Commandos, Captain Fyro Argaius. Although Argaius would be killed by Ventress during the ensuing breakout of Gunray. With Gunray gone, Republic intelligence began a mass hunt to find the Viceroy of the Trade Federation. A potential location came on Vasek 3, but a scouting force of Kit Fisto, his former Padawan, Nadar Veb, and a squad of clones led by Commander Phil attempted a retrieval operation, but ended up walking straight into Grievous's lair. Only Master Fisto survived. The Gunray Affair would be a devastating loss for the Republic, marking a bad precedent for the long year ahead. But the ultimate mission for the Jedi, the capture of the leader of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, Count Dooku, had not waned. They had received a tip-off about a potential lone munificent carrying Count Dooku above Vancor. Jedi General Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi set out to Vancor in haste. Skywalker intentionally became captured by Count Dooku's forces, allowing Kenobi to sneak aboard the ship, the two of them then facing Dooku, but he managed to escape in his starfighter, and despite the Jedi chasing him in a stolen shuttle, both Dooku and the two Jedi ended up crash landing on Vancor. Dooku managed to make it off Vancor relatively quickly, coming across Captain Hondo Onoka and his pirate crew, where he was able to get passage to Florrum. Unbeknownst to Dooku, the planet's only population center was the pirates' own base. Upon arrival on Florrum, he was surrounded by Onoka's pirates and immediately became a prisoner, disarmed of his lightsaber and locked up in a cell. Hondo's plan was to use the captured Dooku as a ransom to bait in the Republic forces and then hold them ransom too, increasing his ultimate payout. Hondo contacted Supreme Chancellor Palpatine on Coruscant, asking for 2 unarmed Jedi to come and take Dooku in exchange for 1 million credits worth of spice. Fortunately for the Republic, Anakin and Obi-Wan had just been rescued by Ahsoka and Captain Rex, and upon hearing the news set off in the twilight to see for themselves if Hondo really was telling the truth. But as they met Onoka, despite an attempted drugging, they were ultimately locked up in the same cell as Count Dooku. But the Republic had already received word from the two Jedi that Dooku was indeed in the custody of the pirate, so they sent the spice anyway, being none the wiser about the current predicament. The Republic, assuming the pirates meant no hostilities towards them, sent a rather small diplomatic mission to escort the ransom payment. Headed up by Kenyan Senator Karras and Naboo representative Jar Jar Binks, their security detail would consist of Commander Stone, an experienced officer of the diplomatic escort service, along with a guard sergeant and 2 troopers. But it seemed that loyalty within the pirate ranks wasn't watertight, as one of Hondo's lieutenants, Took Farso, decided to double-cross his boss and shoot down the incoming transport and attempt to steal the spice. In the crash that followed, Senator Karras was killed, and over the horizon came a squad of pirates on speeder bikes. The clones on Binks formed circle, but were unable to prevent the pirates stealing the spice. Stone preferred to stay put and wait for the inevitable Republic rescue party, but Binks, who was technically the highest ranking among them, decided that going after the pirates was a better idea. Mounting onto a few scolders of native herbivore species on Florrum, they gave chase, eventually catching up to and resecuring the spice. But Falso managed to escape. He convinced Hondo that the Republic had attacked first, not him, and so Hondo authorized a skiff tank platoon to be sent out to destroy them. Upon being cornered by the tanks, Stone asked Jar Jar to go out and distract the pirates with negotiations. While Stone and his men were getting into position, Jar Jar managed to accidentally throw the pirate into one of the controls, hitting another skiff, causing it to crash into the power lines. This would conveniently disconnect Hondo's base from the power grid, allowing Dooku and the 2 Jedi to escape. Stone and the troops were then able to take the surviving pirates prisoner and set out towards Hondo's base. When they arrived, they found Obi-Wan and Anakin holding Hondo at lightsaber point. But with both sides ready to open fire, they let Hondo go, deciding that revenge was ultimately pointless. Commander Stone got the Twilight ready to go, while Kenobi reminded Hondo that although Dooku had escaped, killing Falso in the process, he now knew where the pirates lived. Following this, the Republic would also be chased out of the Eskandar sector, the 327th Star Corps, unable to achieve their objectives. But this losing streak would be halted with Mace Windu and 91st victory over Count Dooku on Ridley, although the Separatist war machine showed no sign of slowing down in the skies of Quell. Jedi General Aayla Secura and Marshal Commander Bly's fleet came under withering fire from Commander TF-1726's munificent strike force, concentrating fire on the Republic point defense weapon systems before deploying hundreds of B-2 aerial battle droids to board the Venators and eliminate the crews. Fortunately for Secura, Skywalker was en route in his capital ship, the Resolute. On arrival, Yularen took command of the naval battle, while Skywalker, Rex and Tano boarded LA-ATs and headed straight towards the burning Venators. Crash landing above the Venators' hangar bay, the group managed to connect with Secura and Bly. Skywalker had arranged for a Consular-class cruiser to dock in the lower hangar bay, but as they were about to board, the blast from a massive explosion ripped through the lower deck of the Venator. Skywalker force-pushed the group to safety, suffering significant injuries in the process. Despite his injuries, the group was able to board and set off, but the cruiser soon came under attack by Separatist flak fire, causing the pilots to be slammed into the controls, activating the hyperdrive to an unknown coordinate. They would end up exiting hyperspace and crash landing on the remote planet of Maridun, and following negotiations with the local Lurman inhabitants, and then defending them from a separatist invasion from Loch Durd, they were able to get off the planet. But Rex would not be getting much rest after his ordeal in the Maridun affair. Being sent to Pantora, he played a pivotal role in brokering peace between the native Tars and the governing Pantorans on Auto Plutonia. This would become known as the One Day War. He was then briefly on Naboo, acting as the highest ranking clone officer during the finding of a secret laboratory owned by Dr. Vinda, threatening to release the deadly Blue Shadow virus back into the galaxy, and despite becoming infected, he eventually recovered. And with so many consecutive defeats, the Republic desperately needed a successful act of aggression against the Separatists. With success the year prior in the southeastern Outer Rim, they chose to attempt the recapture of the recently lost planet of Ryloth. They would assemble the largest Republic ground force since Geonosis. 3 Venators, 3 Acclamators, the 501st under Rex and Skywalker, the 7th Sky Corps under Cody and Kenobi, and the 91st Recon Corps under Mace Windu and Commander Pons.
But before this ground invasion could begin, the Ryloth blockade had to be dealt with. Captain Martuk has at his disposal 2 Munificents and a Lucrehulk. In theory, this was weaker than the 3 Vanitors that Skywalker and Tano would be commanding to defeat the blockade. But once Tano launched her squadron to destroy the relatively small Separatist fleet, Martuk ordered 4 more Munificents to hyperspace in. This last-minute intervention would result in the destruction of Tano's fighters and halted the Republic advance. Only Skywalker's kamikaze move of using a Venator to destroy Martuk's Lucrehulk would enable the Republic to destroy the rest of the CIS's blockade over Ryloth. With the Separatist blockade knocked out of action, the Ryloth invasion force upon 3 acclimators could hyperspace in and begin their descent into Ryloth's atmosphere. As usual, the Republic would send out an initial landing party to ensure the safe landing of the rest of the troops. This endeavour would be given to the most advanced clone company amongst the invasion force, the 2 Top Attack Battalion's Ghost Company. At its helm would be Jedi General Obi-Wan Kenobi and his second-in-command, and the highest-ranking clone in the invasion force, Marshal Commander Cody. Ryloth would be his first major campaign of 21 BBY, spending the latter part of 22 BBY inspecting outposts in the Outer Rim. As the officers met in the hangar to overview the mission, it was decided that the city of Nabat would be a suitable landing area, and so Ghost Company boarded their 6 LEATs and headed out, with Kenobi and Cody in the lead. But the Separatists were not going to hand over Nabat without a fight. The local CIS commander was tactical droid TX-20, and although his droid numbers were limited, he had devised an unorthodox plan to repel the Republic. This plan would centre on the Separatists' newest battlefield weapon, the J1 proton cannons, capable of firing high-velocity shells that could penetrate all known types of Republic armour. The droids had quickly become well aware of the acclimators and 6 LEATs. TX-20 subsequently ordered the proton cannons to target the acclimators. It only took a single shell to knock out the main engines on one of them, causing the low-flying transporter crash, losing all troops aboard. The ships were forced back. It would now be up to Ghost Company to destroy the guns before the acclimators could land. But the droids then targeted the gunships, destroying 4 with only 2 making it to the surface. They landed in a small clearing of a forest. Their first target would be to climb upon the plateau on which Nabat sits to get a better view of the cannons. But as they advanced through the forest, they suddenly came under withering fire from a droid outpost guarding the entrance to the canyons. They were immediately pinned down by small arms fire, and without knowing the droids' positions, they struggled to coordinate their fire. Cody and the surviving members of Ghost Company would draw the droids' fire, while Kenobi took Lieutenants Waxer and Boyle to eliminate the guns. And with some help from Kenobi's force abilities, they were able to throw EMP grenades in and neutralise the droids. Ghost Company would now regroup and prepare to advance through the canyons towards the city of Nabat. But before they could take the city and eliminate the guns, they needed to know what they were up against. Cody picked a small team to recon the canyon. Waxer and Boyle would go south, while Cody and Wooly would try to see what was waiting in the courtyard. The clone lieutenants found a completely abandoned city, but no bodies. This was the first sign that something was very wrong indeed. Cody and Wooly had made it through a small ravine passageway, where they could oversee the courtyard. Here they were able to see that TX-20 had used the Twi'lek inhabitants of Nabat as living shields to stop the Republic simply bombarding the guns. Meanwhile, Waxer and Boyle had come across a lone Twi'lek child that was soon spotted by a probe droid. With this new information, TX-20 decided to play his trump card, releasing over a dozen starved and angry gut curs straight at the clones. Waxer and Boyle became pinned down by 2 of them. Luckily, the Twi'lek child was able to show them a way out using the tunnel system. Back in the main canyon, Cody had informed Kenobi of the situation in the courtyard, and the group began advancing towards it. But they too were suddenly ambushed by the gut curs. Despite several clones being killed, Kenobi was able to force mind trick the beasts into a small chasm, where Cody and his men could shoot rocks above, trapping the gut curs and allowing Ghost Company to continue. It was then that Waxer and Boyle emerged from the tunnel system, explaining how they did so to the commander. This gave Kenobi an idea. He, Waxer and Boyle would use the tunnels to flank the courtyard and free the Twi'leks while Cody and his men distracted the main droid force. TX-20 took the bait and immediately sent out the bulk of his forces to engage Cody. Kenobi had by this time reached the courtyard and under the droid's nose freed the Twi'leks. He then commandeered one of the proton cannons and used it to destroy the rest in quick succession. TX-20 attempted to turn around and engage Kenobi, but was ripped out of his AAT and destroyed by the now freed Twi'leks. With their commander eliminated, the rest of the droid forces around the Bat were either destroyed or forced to fall back. This would create the First Republic foothold on Ryloth, and at last allowed the two acclimators to land and begin disembarking the elements of the 7th Sky Corps and 91st who were aboard. It had been a remarkable feat for Ghost Company, and although overseen by the highly capable General Kenobi, it would never have been achieved as successfully without the 7th Sky Corps' beloved Martial Commander. Cody had once again proved why his legacy would become one of the most infamous and respected of any Martial Commander in the Grand Army of the Republic, but for Kenobi and Cody's forces, that would be the last they would see of the Canyons. They would head south into the Jixuan Desert to liberate southern Ryloth from Separatist control. The final push for Ryloth's capital would be handed over to another equally respected corps, led by two of the most veteran leaders of the GAR, Mace Windu and Commander Pond's 91st Recon Corps. The route to the capital will take the 91st through some of the most dangerous mountain passes of Ryloth, a fact that Separatist commanders Wat Tambor and TA-175 hope to exploit. The worst part of the long journey for the Republic forces is a narrow cliff passageway, with a sheer cliff drop to the right and a vertical incline to the left, just wide enough to maneuver an ATTE. Windu and Pons would lead the column of 9 ATTEs carrying 20 clones each, and all their crew, amounting to 253 clones. So with some estimates, I think this is about one ATTE company. I made this infographic if you want to pause and have a look. The short but highly dangerous stretch of journey to the capital was a prime target for Wat Tambor. If he could stop the Republic advance here, the clones would have to find another way around, giving Tambor's droid forces some much needed time. The droids would position several AAT hover tanks overlooking the passage, aiming and taking out the lead tank first, then targeting the rear. A by-the-books tactic of causing chaos in any armoured column, and with the ATTEs in such a tight rank formation, they couldn't miss. Windu evacuates the now immobile Command ATTE in the front, but under a hail of blaster fire from the droids' positions, it is Commander Pons who organises the clones into a defensive position to be able to return fire on the droids. Windu would then order Pons to call up Lightning Squadron, the company's AT-RT detachment, manned by Advanced Recon Force, or ARF, troopers. And while the commander evacuated the wounded to the rear of the column, Windu pushed the destroyed walker off the cliff, mounted an AT-RT walker, and led Lightning Squadron towards the droid's main position. This move put the OOM series droid commander on the back foot, and before he could organise a sufficient defence of his position, he and his troops were neutralised by Lightning Squadron. Pons led the surviving walkers and regrouped to Windu on the much safer plateau. The clones had only suffered 32 casualties, a remarkably small amount, considering what could have been a disastrous scenario. With the dangerous canyons behind them, Windu and Pons could at last begin their assault on the capital, a task far easier said than done. Windu would contact the rest of the invasion force to plan the next stages of the campaign. By this time, Kenobi had secured the sparsely populated Jixuan Desert, giving the Republic control of the southern hemisphere, and although Skywalker and Rex had seen off the remaining Separatist cruisers in orbit, they were in no position to provide Windu with more troops. These two factors put Windu in a difficult situation. With only 200 troops under his command, there was no way he could lay siege and take the heavily fortified capital by himself. He planned to contact and convince Cham Syndulla, the leader of the Twi'lek resistance who had fought alongside the Republic forces during the initial Separatist invasion of Ryloth, to join forces with the Republic's clone army once more to liberate the capital. Despite pushback from politicians on Coruscant, worried that Syndulla was far too much the radical to be trusted, Windu had no choice but to seek him out. Pons and the tank column would proceed towards the capital, while Windu and two ARF troopers would go seek out the Twi'lek resistance.
it didn't take long to find a destroyed MTT droid transport. But this is not the work of clone weaponry, it was that of Syndulla's fighters. At first he was reluctant to join the Republic. To him, clones on Ryloth sounded too much like an imperialist occupation rather than liberation. Syndulla was wiser than most, even the Jedi, to Palpatine and his supporters in the Senate's machinations for planets such as Ryloth in the Outer Rim. But with Pons reporting that Wat Tambor had begun a firebombing campaign against villages across Ryloth, Syndulla agreed to a joint offensive against Tambor's last holdout in the capital. By the time Windu had made contact with Cham Syndulla, the leader of the Separatist Alliance, Count Dooku, had contacted Wat Tambor and TA-175, ordering them to withdraw to prevent any more embarrassment for the Confederacy. It was then that the firebombing campaign against Ryloth's civilian population would begin. In Tambor's view, if he couldn't keep Ryloth, the galaxy would be forced to learn the price of a Republic victory. As the Twi'lek fighters mounted on their blurks and met up with the ATTE column, they could finally get a good view of their main objective. The capital was sat atop a pillar, surrounded by what seemed like a bottomless ravine. The only point of entry was a retractable plasma bridge. There should have been no way to enter the city before Tambor had evacuated, but Tambor's Achilles heel was his greed. The last shipment of stolen Ryloth wealth was headed to Lesu to be flown off-world. Tambor wanted this last shipment before he left, so with Commander Pons positioned on the high ground, waiting for his chance to provide covering fire, Windu and two ARF troopers jumped onto and quietly entered one of the MTT transports heading for the bridge. Windu knew that the droids would scan the MTT for organic life forms before allowing it to enter the city. So, as the droids stopped the convoy to inspect the vehicles, Windu and the ARS leaped out. The Jedi force pushed the clones to a safe distance, just as the plasma bridge began rapidly receding. Climbing onto a stap speeder, he managed to make it to safety, but they were not in the clear just yet. Tambor had ordered all his forces to push back this foothold. Meanwhile, tactical droid TA-175 had given up on Tambor's plan and stolen the only shuttle out, ordering the capital to be firebombed upon his departure. Not that it would have mattered, because the ARFs had reactivated the plasma bridge, allowing the combined 91st and Twi'lek forces to storm across the bridge and make quick work of the B-1s and AATs. Surrounded and outgunned, Tambor surrendered, and even 175's last-ditch attack of hyena bombers on the capital was thwarted. Anakin and Ahsoka thundered in to take them out. Wat Tambor was forced to surrender without conditions. Ironically, saved by Anakin Skywalker, and sure that friendship lasted long. And with that final blow to his authority, Wat Tambor's iron grip over Ryloth had finally come to an end. With Ryloth firmly back in Republic hands, it seemed to many that the Republic's fortunes may be improving. But just weeks after Ryloth, the clone army would suffer another devastating defeat at Felucia, General Grievous claiming a remarkable victory, and another naval defeat at Deveron, leading to a dramatic galaxy-wide chase to prevent the bounty hunter Cad Bane escaping with a Jedi holocron. The Battle of Malastare would see the first testing of the Electro-Proton bomb, giving way to a remarkable Swift Republic victory, with very few clone casualties. But the bomb's destructive power caused a fault in the planet's crust, allowing one of the planet's giant Zillo beasts to emerge. Once the beast had been subdued, Palpatine and the Dug signed the Treaty of Malastare, giving them protection from the CIS and, in return, allowing the Zillo beast to be taken back to Coruscant, against the express advice of the Jedi. Following tests on the beast, it escaped, ravaging the epicenter of Coruscant Administrative District, only ending following the beast's death. But 21 BBY would not be all smooth sailing for the Confederacy. Padme Amidala's mission to Cato Nemoidia would reveal the location of a massive new droid foundry on Geonosis, the planet being reoccupied by the CIS, slowly pushing out Republic forces since the start of the war. So the Republic would assemble its rapid reaction forces, and before the Geonosians could get wind of their plan, they would attack.
The naval campaign will be directed by Admiral Wolf Yularen, a veteran of the Battle of Malastare 13 years earlier. He is an anomaly in the Navy of the Galactic Republic, one of the few non-clone officers to remain in frontline service, as opposed to transferring to intelligence and diplomatic roles. His fleet, the largest he has ever commanded, contains 10 Acclamator-class assault ships. At this stage of the war, the massed ranks of Acclamators seen at the first Battle of Geonosis was avoided in favour of Venator-only fleets, but so large is the invasion force that the Acclamators will have to suffice. He will also have 6 Venators on hand as carriers and to be used for ship-on-ship combat. His flagship, the Resolute, will be the nerve centre for the Geonosian campaign. Until the ground war begins, he will be accompanied aboard the Resolute by Jedi General Anakin Skywalker and his second-in-command, Captain Rex. Skywalker and Rex have by this point established themselves as the most successful Jedi clone pairing in the GAR. Rex himself is recognised as one of the very best clone officers the Republic can call upon for such a campaign, being awarded the Jagais earlier in the Clone Wars. Together they will lead the most battle-hardened legion in the Clone Army, the 501st. 9,200 clones in all. Aboard a neighbouring Venator, High Jedi General Obi-Wan Kenobi will oversee the entire campaign. He will bring a 7th Sky Corps, 36,000 strong, but for the main assault on the droid foundry he will rely on his elite 212th Attack Battalion. His second-in-command and the highest-ranking clone officer in the invasion force is Marshal Commander Cody. Loyal, dependable, and only a year into the war has cemented his place as one of the Republic's most competent commanders. It is due to these factors that Kenobi will trust Cody with complete oversight for the 7th Sky Corps, as well as often turning to him for advice on the Geonosian campaign as a whole. There are other familiar faces joining the invasion force. Senior Jedi General Luminara Unduli and Marshal Commander Gree will land away from the main force, only joining them once the path to the foundry is cleared. The most unique infantry unit present is Commander Jets' Special Operations Battalion, a subunit from the elite Special Operations Brigade. His troops have the most diverse mix of experience of any clones in the task force. Saboteurs, spies and assassins. The Spec Ops troopers will be on hand to provide the expertise throughout the campaign. Commander Jet himself is experienced with all forms of tactical command, and is known by his fellow commanders as a tough fighter and competent strategist. For Geonosis, Jet will report to and fight alongside Jedi General Ki-Adi-Mundi. Although the main focus of the campaign was to cripple the droid-making facilities, the Republic needed to retake Geonosis in full to ensure the planet would not have to be taken a third time. For this, they massed the most experienced units into one massive infantry, armour and air support. As the Jedi and their clone officers gathered on the Resolute to hear the plan, they prepared some contingencies. If one group hadn't made it to the landing zone, the forces at Point Rain would wait and hold out until they were all gathered to make the push towards the foundry. With that plan finalised, they would each return to their Venators and board their gunships. The fleet descends into the atmosphere of Geonosis, and in scenes reminiscent of their first battle here, they are instantly bombarded by Geonosian artillery and swarmed by fighters. Skywalker's gunships have a late start and have to fly over an already alerted enemy, taking severe casualties and losing every single ATTE walker. Along with all the crews and troops aboard, they are hit and forced to crash land. Mundi and Jet soon come under similar withering flak fire and decide to land far from Point Rain to avoid taking any more casualties. Jet advises Cody to get his tanks down as soon as possible. Cody is among the first clones to reach the rendezvous and quickly realises that only the 212th has made it. Even then, Kenobi is still missing. Living up to his reputation, Cody forms a circle with the gunships and walkers and prepares to withstand a full attack from the entire advance of the droid army protecting the foundry. His depleted battalion will face an enemy that outnumbers him more than 20 to 1. The situation on Geonosis is dire. Skywalker has crashed beyond imposing mountains and fortresses. Mundi does not yet know if there is a path through to Point Rain at all, and Cody is left all alone, coming under a hail of droids, tanks and Geonosians. Skywalker will face minimal droid resistance on the ground, but would run straight into the fortress that blocks their path into the main canyon that will lead to the foundry. Skywalker and his Padawan Ahsoka Tano will rush the guns, and take the fortress from the top down, while Rex and his limited number of surviving troops provide covering fire. Seeing them surrounded by droidekas, Rex climbs up the fortress and skillfully takes out droidekas with his DC-17, allowing the Jedi to destroy the fortress and continue their advance. Mundi and Jet would face tank obstacles which the wounded Mundi had to fell with his lightsaber, but as a fighting force their battalion was almost useless in open battle. Mundi puts his hope in joining up with Skywalker on the way to the rendezvous, but trusting in the Force alone is not enough for Commander Jet. He was adamant that Admiral Yularen send down some fighters to help Cody. Yularen would try to scrape up any spare bombers he could find, but for now the clones on the ground would have no air cover. Meanwhile, at Point Rain, Cody has seen a gunship go down beyond the rendezvous point. He thinks it's Kenobi, and so sends out Lieutenants Waxer and Boyle to investigate. They find Kenobi and carry him back to the 212th. But Kenobi is seriously wounded and half the clones under Cody's command are too. The question is, how long can he hold out? Mundi has by this stage reached a large, imposing ridge. His instincts tell him to head through a cave system, which he hopes will allow him to connect up with Skywalker's forces. Despite Jet having some concerns with the idea, he trusts his commander's instincts. They leave the walkers behind and keep a squad to protect them. The rest of the battalion will advance into the darkness. The cave is narrow and there is a strange tension in the air, but as they advance and see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, dozens of Geonosians attack, blocking them in. Knowing they must reach Kenobi's position, Mundi calls up the flame troopers who have been attached to the Spec Ops battalion, and with the Geneva Convention holding little weight over them, they burn the Geonosians alive. Still, with no signs of support, Cody is on the brink. They have been pushed back as far as they can go. Kenobi ignites his lightsaber and prepares to make a last stand with the 212th, but at that moment a squadron of Y-Wings thunders in, their proton bombs annihilating the enemy attack. To add to the celebrations, Mundi and Skywalker have met up and are racing to support, and with their swift arrival, the Geonosian attack buckles and is forced to pull back. Despite one of the most disastrous invasions of the war so far, Point Rain is secured. With the 3 battalions now assembled at Point Rain, they can begin their offensive against Poggle-Les's droid foundry. Protecting this facility is a shield generator array to protect it from orbital bombardment. This must be taken out before they can even get close to the foundry. Anakin and Ahsoka will lead a small team of clones into the shield to distract the Geonosians and temporarily disable their artillery to allow the tanks in. The plan is put into motion as soon as possible, Anakin and Ahsoka leading troops of the 501st in a running battle, some being picked off by the Geonosians and up to half being killed. But eventually they make it to within range of the artillery. They throw droid poppers at them and then order the ATTs to destroy the shield generator. With the shield down, the gunships can come in with their firepower superiority and are able to drive out the Geonosian defenders. With the immediate threat of an attack now gone, the wounded Kenobi and Mundi are able to return to the fleet to heal their wounds. From elsewhere on Geonosis, Luminara Unduli and Commander Gree arrive with a battalion of the 41st Elite Corps. The 41st is a tight-knit and by-the-books unit. Skywalker will now take command of the entire operation against the heavily fortified droid foundry. Skywalker and Unduli will approach the factory in a parade column to distract the Geonosians into thinking they are the only attacking force. Meanwhile, their Padawans, Ahsoka, Tano, and Barriss Offee will infiltrate the facility and destroy it from the inside. As the advance begins, the Padawans split off and covertly enter the catacombs under the factory. Meanwhile, Skywalker, Unduli, Rex, and Gree come under a torrent of blaster fire from the droids. The garrison of the factory has been bolstered from the factory itself, but they are walking into a trap. The Geonosians will wait until they are far enough in before swarming out of their hives to attack the Republic forces in the rear. This surprise puts the clones on the back foot, but they soon regain their initiative. Seeing this counterattack fail, Poggle sends out his ultimate battlefield weapon, the brand new Separatist super tanks. Rex orders in the artillery to blast them, but they hold strong. Their raid shields are impenetrable to any Republic weapons. Skywalker orders all the troops back to bait the tanks over the bridge, then destroys the bridge eliminating all the super tanks. With the bulk of droid and Geonosian resistance crumbling, the Padawans are able to destroy the factory, and despite being stuck under the rubble, are able to be rescued using the carriers. With his army and droid factories destroyed, Poggle retreats into the wastelands of Geonosis, and is eventually found and taken prisoner by Republic forces. At last, one of the most costly battles of the war is over, and Geonosis is once more in Republic hands. Following Geonosis, Dantooine would shortly become under siege, but the stubborn Republic defences held firm, and the droid army was forced to retreat. But disaster would hit the Republic. At Saleucami, Jedi Master Eve Koff and Captain Locke would be attacked, and then boarded by General Grievous. Instead of killing the Jedi Master, he held him hostage, knowing that the Republic would have to come and attempt a rescue. Coordinates were found by Commander Wolf after examining the holo message and finding Koff's discreet hand movements. A great naval task force from the Open Circle Armada was assembled. 3 Venators, 3 cruisers and an acclimator, carrying element to the 501st Legion and 212th Attack Battalion. Fleet Admiral Wulfularin would command this force, with Kenobi and Cody attempting to use one of the cruisers as bait to board Grievous' ship and distract him, while Skywalker, Rex and Jedi General Adi Gallia hyperspaced in dangerously close to Grievous' ship in a shuttle to sneak aboard and rescue Eve Koff. Despite the severely injured Jedi Master being rescued, Grievous managed to escape planetside. It took a substantial cleanup operation on the ground, with the 501st and 212th scouting half the planet, but ultimately Grievous was able to escape. Following this string of fairly mainstream engagements, the neutral planet of Mandalore would find itself at the sharp end of the Clone Wars. Terror attacks, assassination plots and marginalisation would all be key factors in this side conflict. Duchess Satine Kryze struggled throughout the conflict to keep her infamously volatile people out of the war. But during this period of 21 BBY, the Jedi's heavy-handed meddling in Mandalorian affairs would, in the long term, prove disastrous. In an unexpected turn of events, Boba Fett, son of the dead bounty hunter, Jango Fett, was able to sneak aboard Mace Windu's Venator, the Endurance, and sabotage it from the inside. During the ensuing chaos, some of the crew became hostage of the bounty hunters. One of these was Commander Pons, being killed by Aurra Sing and dumped into wild space. A sad end for such a veteran commander of the Grand Army of the Republic. With 21 BBY coming closer to conclusion, many of the Republic's concerns seem to be domestic operations, as opposed to fighting the droid army on the battlefield, with more civil wars on Bailiff, yet more Republic interventions on Mandalore, and thwarted assassination attempts on Coruscant. But the most crucial battle of the year was about to dwarf the Republic political entanglements, because the Republic had just learned of a potential attack on the clones' homeworld of Kamino. Skywalker and Kenobi raced to reinforce Kamino's massive defensive fleet, with the 501st bolstering the troops on the ground, but the Separatists had other ideas about how to infiltrate the Republic's defences. As the clones were settling into their quarters, the Aquadroid forces, who had remained hidden, suddenly emerged from the water and assaulted the cloning facilities from all directions. The Separatist ground strategy was simple. While Grievous and the Aquadroid forces assaulted the main cloning infrastructure, doing as much damage as possible, Ventress would steal the Jango Fett DNA. This would allow them to create a bioweapon that would only kill clone troopers. These Aquadroids would be transported within the giant Trident-class assault ships. The clones did not have sufficient time to build adequate defences, but the mixed group of clone defenders quickly took up key positions in the most vulnerable areas of Topoka City. ARC Commander Havoc would assign clone troopers to defensive positions, including Echo and Fives, to a gantry overlooking some of the main walkways. As the Trident swarmed around the hangar, ARC Commanders Hammer and Havoc would lead its defense, just about managing to hold off the waves of Aquadroids being released from the Tridents. On the open walkways, scattered groups of clone troopers would fight many small battles against much larger, numbers of droids, taking heavy casualties and being forced to pull back and back again and again. Out on the catwalks, Skywalker and Kenobi would hold one of the main walkways with a small group of 501st clone troopers. It was here they realised the droid assault was only a distraction. Skywalker went to defend the DNA vault while Kenobi went after Grievous. Back out on the gantry, Echo and Fires would find Clone 99 and a small group of clone cadets who had been separated from their group. 99 would help them find the best route to the barracks. As the droids pushed through the hangar, ARC commanders were forced to pull back. The Rancor battalion commander, Colt, was left outnumbered with a handful of clone troopers. As he began to engage the droids surrounding Grievous, he was force choked and killed by Ventress, after which she headed for the DNA vault. The clones would be pushed back on almost every front. Eventually Rex and Cody made their way to the barracks, where they would then decide that the group must head for the armory to re-equip and gear up. Meanwhile, a small unit of droids attacked the command room, killing one clone with Shakti quickly eliminating them. This revealed to the Jedi how thinned out the Separatists' attack had become. In the DNA vault, Ventress would acquire the Jango Fett DNA, with Skywalker quickly confronting her. From a side door in the armory, the group of clones would ambush Grievous's droid escort, just as Kenobi arrived to confront him, eventually getting the upper hand and forcing him to retreat. Kenobi would chase him to a landing pad where after a short fight he would retreat in his shuttle. The clones in the armory would be pursued by the droids, but with help from clone cadets, they eliminated them. However, they did lose Clone 99 in the crossfire. Back in the main hangar, Shakti had joined ARC Commander Hammer and managed to clear the hangar bay. ARC Commander Blitz would lead a small team of ARC troopers to destroy many of the Trident ships on the exterior of Topoka City. Not far from the hangar bay, Anakin had pushed Ventress back through the cloning facilities. She almost got the upper hand, but was surrounded by 501st troopers and forced to retreat in Grievous' shuttle without getting the DNA. Following the clear-up of the last remaining droid forces and Trident ships, the cleanup effort began. Commander Blitz can be seen helping around the hangar bay. It is also here that Captain Rex made Echo and Five's ARC troopers within the 501st Legion, in recognition of their bravery during the battle. Although in my opinion he slightly spoiled the moment by talking about how great he also was. Although I suppose if anyone could get away with it, it would be one of the most decorated officers in the clone army. The saving of Kamino gave Rex and Cody some well-deserved rest, after a rather tense few months on the front lines. The conclusion to the blockade over Pantora, the Senate hostage crisis, the hunt for the now escaped Zero the Hutt, and the bombing of the Senate would round out the last month of 21 BBY. The previous year had seen very few significant clashes between the great armies of the Republic or Confederacy, but all that was about to change. The first shots of 20 BBY would be from the Open Circle Armada above Sullust. In an attempt to control Sullust's vital hyperspace access, Dooku sent his apprentice, Asajj Ventress, to take on the combined forces of Kenobi and Skywalker's task forces, commanded by Fleet Admiral Wolf Yularen from the Venator Resolute. Ventress's opening move was to take out the Republic's capital ship, aiming to knock out their command and control to cause a break in the Republic's communications and fighting effectiveness. With multiple squadrons of advanced tri-fighters, Ventress cleared a path to the Resolute, taking out the portside shield generator, then aiming for the bridge and shooting it to pieces. From there, the Venator's weak interior stood no chance and quickly crumbled. Admiral Yularen was able to make it out, just in time. A sad end for arguably the most famous ship to fight for the Republic. The three commanders were then engaged in a dogfight, each of them crashing inside the Providence command ship's hangar bay. But as they duelled, Dooku had been given orders to kill Ventress from Darth Sidious. The Sith Lord had begun to worry that Dooku was training Ventress to be able to take him out. So, at his master's behest, he ordered tactical droid TJ-912 to open fire on the droid command ship. The Jedi were able to escape, but Ventress was, from the point of view of Dooku, dead. But she survived, making her way back to her homeworld of Dathomir, where she was met by their leader, Mother Talzin. She promised support in eliminating the Count of Sereno.
When Ventress and the two Night Sisters encountered Dooku, they were sufficiently disguised, to the point that Dooku thought they were Jedi, and despite being decisively beaten, the three Night Sisters made their way back to Dathomir to hatch a new plan to take out the Sith Lord. However, 20 BBY was about to see a devastating Republic defeat on Sarish. The 212 Attack Battalion and its accompanying Clone Commando unit, under Captain Gregor, would be routed, and many of its ranks killed. Gregor managed to help some survivors get to safety, but he ended up stranded on Abathar, presumed dead. And there was more bad news closer to home for the Republic. On Deveron, Jedi General Halsey and Clone Commander Trauma were tasked with defending the Temple of Edict, built upon a Virgins in the Force, a sacred place for the Jedi Order. Commander Trauma and his men had thus far defended the temple area well, against sparse but consistent Separatist attacks. This changed when Dooku deployed his new apprentice, secretly working for Asajj Ventress, Savage Opress. In vicious hand-to-hand combat, he smashed through the Republic line of clones. Trauma rushed to meet him, but was slain too. The two Jedi, Halsey and his Padawan, put up a determined last stand, but were ultimately killed. Savage's first experience in battle had led to the complete destruction of the entire clone unit, and put Deveron in Separatist hands. Henceforth, this campaign would be known by its final act as the Deveron Massacre. The clone commanders of Delta Squad would retrieve Master Halsey's body and bring it back to Coruscant. Following his victory on Deveron, Savage Opress was sent by Dooku to Toydaria to kidnap the Toydarian king, Katunko, but with the Jedi hot on his heels, finally figuring out it was him responsible for the Deveron massacre, Savage was cornered in the Toydarian throne room, fighting Skywalker and Kenobi and killing the king in the process. He escaped to his ship and destroyed the Jedis before they could catch up. Savage met Dooku in an awaiting munificent, but Dooku was furious with him for killing the Toydarian king and not bringing him back alive. Then Ventress appeared on Dooku's ship too, and her plan playing out letter by letter, joined with a press to take on Dooku. The two almost got the upper hand when Dooku managed to flee, and at the moment Ventress chased after him, the two Jedi arrived. The Munificent was now turned into an arena, with Jedi taking on Savage and Ventress taking on Dooku. Ventress ultimately managed to escape from Dooku after being disarmed. Dooku then gave the droids orders to kill Ventress and Savage, but with minimal droid forces stationed on the Munificent, the Jedi, Savage and Ventress were swiftly able to escape. Returning to Coruscant, the two Jedi and Ahsoka will be sent to investigate the source of an ancient Jedi distress signal beyond the Outer Rim. There they were met by Captain Rex's Venator at the same coordinates, but when they arrived he was nowhere to be found. After a momentary glitch, Captain Rex was able to find them, and despite the Jedi's tale of meeting mystical Force beings, he never quite believed them. But the Republic was about to be in the thick of it, with a Separatist surprise attack. A massive Separatist fleet jumped out of hyperspace to ambush Jedi General Even Pial and Captain Tarkin's fleet returning from the Outer Rim. Their cargo, coordinates of a secret Nexus route, linking the winding passageways between the Republic and Separatist heartlands. It could have been a relatively easy retrieval job for the Republic. After all, the droids would have just assumed this was any old random Jedi, unknowing of the secret intel he held, but instead he was sent to be held prisoner in the Citadel on Lola Sayu, a facility once under Republic control, ironically built to the utmost security standards. Even if one was able to escape from the tower, the planet and its unusually large droid garrison would surely kill them off. The Republic would have to assemble a formidable strike force to sneak past the planet's blockade and break into the Citadel. This responsibility would be put upon General Kenobi, his Marshal Commander Cody, and troopers of his elite 212th Attack Battalion, along with General Skywalker, his Captain Rex, and troopers of his 501st Legion. To get past the blockade, they would have to not be detected by the lifeform scanners. They chose to be frozen into carbonite slabs. For this, they relied on R2-D2, and gave him 3 reprogrammed B-1 battle droids to command the shuttle and fool the blockade into letting them pass. With the shuttle on the planet's surface, the droids could unfreeze the organics, and to most of their surprise, Skywalker's Padawan, Ahsoka Tano, had snuck aboard. Oh well, too late to go back now. Of course, they couldn't land too close to the Citadel itself. The roaming patrols of Stap speeders would catch them out, so they had to set out on the march towards the Citadel, where a disappointing sight awaited them. The only path was traversing a near vertical cliff.
and even worse, the cliff was mined, so the team couldn't use grapple hooks, meaning they had to free climb it. Although they made it, one of the 501st clones would be lost in the process. But that clone would trip a mine on the cliff and alert the commander, Ozy Sobet, of the Republic's presence, sending in his elite close quarters commando droids to snuff them out. During their route to find even PL, one of the 212 clones would be killed by an electrified wall. But despite the growing casualty number, they were able to find PL, just as he was being tortured. The 501st, ARCs, 5s and Echo storming in. But there was a problem. PL only knew half the coordinates. Tarkin, being held with the other clone officers, knew the other half. So the team set off to retrieve the rest of the Republic prisoners. Along the way, they would come across Sobek's commando droids, be stripped of their weapons by a magnetized roof, and came under a relentless barrage from droid reinforcements, but ultimately they were able to find and free the Republic captives. The team decided to split up to protect the information in case they got captured, Obi-Wan taking Peel and Skywalker taking Tarkin. Obi-Wan took an interior route using ventilation shafts, while Skywalker managed to break out of the Citadel and go to the rendezvous of R2-D2 using the narrow canyons. The security breach had been brought to Count Dooku's attention. He reminded Sobek that information must not fall into Republic hands, and ordered that the Republic strike team be killed when captured. During the march, Tarkin mused that the Citadel would be much better off in Republic hands, and that having a child to lead the group was a bad idea. Rex replied that he had full confidence in Commander Tano. At the rendezvous, R2-D2 was momentarily captured by the Separatists, but his reprogrammed B-1 battle droids were able to fool the tactical droid. This meant that when Obi-Wan and Peel were discovered and captured by the droids, R2 and his B1 could intercept them and free them without the droids becoming any the wiser. Ultimately, both teams made it to the rendezvous and attempted to board the shuttle, but they became surrounded by the Citadel's garrison, and in an attempt to rush the shuttle, ARC Trooper Echo was killed. They had to back off and contact Coruscant for reinforcements, as, for now, they had no way off Lola Sayu. They would, for the time being, have to hide out in the cave system, constantly avoiding roaming stat patrols and hoping that the Republic could break through K2-B4's blockade over the planet. The team would once again come under heavy attack, R2's B1s sacrificing themselves to buy the team some time. It was then that the Republic had organised a 4 Venator-strong rescue party, led by Plo Koon and Admiral Coburn, accompanied by his 104th Attack Battalion. But as the fleet was reaching Lola Sayu, another massive droid assault wave hit the strike team, killing more clones and Master Peel. Ahsoka memorised Peel's half of the Nexus route coordinates, and just in time, the Republic fleet arrived. The team boarding LA-AT are heading straight back to Coruscant. Their mission in spirit a failure. Master Peel was dead, but the coordinates of the secret Nexus route remained in Republic hands. Coruscant would therefore be safe from attack. For now, it was a tough ordeal for the clones too. Only Rex, Cody and ARC Trooper 5 survived. Their highly experienced and veteran clones of the 501st and 212th now lost. There was little time to mourn the loss of clones whom their officers had become so attached, for another of the war's grey battlegrounds had once again flared up. Since the late stages of 22 BBY, a low-scale war has been raging on Felucia. The small isolated Republic and Separatist forces both trying to cling on to territory. Seeing an opportunity for an easy victory after a pretty hard few weeks, the Republic dispatched more reinforcements to Felucia, including more tank companies led by Plo Koon and Commander Wolf, as well as sending rapid response units of the 501st Legion, led by Skywalker, Tano and Rex. Hearing of this build-up of Republic forces on the planet, Grievous sends his own reinforcements to the outpost on Felucia, setting the groundwork for a much larger clash of arms to emerge. The Republic column, consisting of infantry, ATTEs and A6 juggernauts, inched towards the Separatist outpost. Leaving the vehicles behind to not rouse attention, the infantry hid behind foliage, the indigenous species of Felucia, providing convincing camouflage to hide from the droids. And as the droids came out, they split into 3 groups: Plo and Wolf, Skywalker and Rex, and Tano with 104th Corporal Comet. While the other 2 took the droids, Tano and the other 104th troopers would attempt to climb the wall and take out the tactical droid commander. But as the clones had just gotten over, Tano became ambushed and captured by Trandoshan hunters. The Republic forces would capture the outpost and secure Felucia, but Tano was now missing. She would be held hostage by the Trandoshan hunters, eventually being freed by Wookiees and brought back to Coruscant. It was back in the capital that the Jedi Council decided that if they wanted to keep disgruntled worlds loyal to the Republic, they may have to start interfering in their domestic affairs, and a few systems were more important than Mon Cala. Mon Cala for so long has been a rock-solid Republic stronghold, but following the murder of the ruling Mon Calamari king, the two sentient populations, the Mon Calamari and the Quarren, are divided. The Separatists have provided advisors to the Quarren, hoping to foment a civil war in which the benefactors will be themselves. The Republic in turn sends their own advisor, Senator Padme Amidala, with her Jedi bodyguard, Anakin Skywalker, to attempt to find a middle ground. But the Quarren outright refuse the leadership of the old king's son, Prince Lee Char. The only course of action left is war. The Separatists send in Aqua Droid reinforcements under Commander Riff Tamson, joined by the Quarren Isolation League, led by Chieftain Nossa Ree, the old king's former ally. The Mon Calamari didn't expect an attack from the Quarren, but as they were gathering their troops, the Quarren and their droid allies attacked the capital, Mon Cala City. Skywalker recommended that the Prince Lee Char be evacuated to safety, but the prince refused, promising to stay on the front lines with his soldiers. The Mon Calamari troops were nominally led by Gial Akbar, captain of the King's Guard. The Mon Cala requested help from the Republic. They decided to send in one of their very few clone scuba regiments. This regiment, led by Jedi General Kit Fisto and Commander Monk, along with Skywalker's Padawan Ahsoka Tano. While they were underwater, the Venator would be under the command of Captain Rex. The Mon Cala troops were significantly on the back foot until the clones arrived. Their experience of fighting Aqua Droids evidently valuable, and although it was not a quick and decisive fight, the joint Quarren Droid Army was forced to retreat into the deeper corals. But the Jedi knew that this war was far from won. Tamson brought in dozens of Hydroid Medusas from his homeworld Karkaris, half organic, half mechanic, dropped in on Separatist munificence. With these reinforcements, their technology and weaknesses unknown to the Republic forces, they could be used as distractions, while Tamson led his allied forces in behind the Republic Mon Cala lines, cutting many of them down and forcing them to retreat into the vast cave system. Kit Fisto managed to hold the line to allow the prince and his forces to retreat, but for now, it looked like the Separatists had won. But there were already signs of the tensions between the Quarren and their supposed liberators. Tamson threatened to kill Nossa Ree over his Quarren force's late arrival to the battle. This would be the first of many rifts between the two uneasy allies. Despite their differences though, the Republic was in hiding and the Separatist forces were on the move. The Quarren took any stray clones and Mon Cala as prisoners, so the Republic forces in hiding contacted the Jedi Council for help. But they had no available units large enough capable of aquatic combat. The Republic simply didn't fight underwater enough to need them, so the Republic would turn to its much less famous but perhaps more important military, the Planetary Defense Forces. Most systems had their own militia to protect against pirates and bandits, but some had grand armies with real combat experience. One of these was the Gungans of Naboo. Skywalker and Captain Akbar would destroy Mon Cala's planetary scanners to stop the Separatists. Seeing the incoming Republic ships, led by Senate Representative and former Gungan General Jar Jar Binks, the Gungans would arrive just in time to begin an attack on the Separatist formations and head towards the prison camps. But Tamson sent in his last reserves of Aqua Droids and Tridents. And this whirlwind attack led to the Republic reinforcements, Skywalker and Kit Fisto being captured. Only Lee Char and Ahsoka remained free, now in hiding. To attempt to find Lee Char, Tamson began torturing his captives, including the Jedi. Then, the Separatist prison camps were now full of Mon Cala, clones and Gungans. The prince managed to sneak into the camp. His plan was to unite the Mon Cala and the Quarren to fight back against the Separatists, but it was Tamson himself who would bring together the two peoples. He broke with his agreement with the Quarren leader, Nossa Ree, revealing his plan to take Mon Cala for himself. This would be the beginning of the end of the Quarren Separatist alliance. When his forces captured the prince, Tamson ordered he be executed, but during the execution, the Quarren rose up attacking a droid and handing out weapons to the Republic forces. Tamsin sent in his own droids, but they're not enough to repel the massive Republic army. This would prove the largest underwater clash of the Clone Wars. Thousands of scuba clones, Mon Cala soldiers, Gungans and their new Quarren allies. And the final blow to Tamsin's authority over Mon Cala was his death at the hands of Prince Lichar. He would be crowned King of Mon Cala, ruling peacefully over the Mon Calamari and the Quarren. Mon Cala would remain a loyal Republic stronghold in the northeast for the rest of the war. But the Gungan intervention clearly stuck in the mind of the Separatists, and the Gungans themselves were divided. The influential minister Richelieu in Boss-Leone's government had been encouraging the Gungan leader to align his people with the Confederacy. Richelieu's control of Leone was so strong that he had convinced many of the Gungan Grand Army's officers to support a joint separatist Gungan attack on the Naboo capital of Theed. But with the timely intervention of Senator Padme Amidala and Representative Jar Jar Binks, the Gungans were able to trick the droid reinforcements, led by General Grievous. Then, at the cost of his own life, Gungan General Tarpal, victor of the Battle of Naboo 12 years prior, was able to disarm the Supreme Martial Commander of the droid armies, allowing the Gungans to take him prisoner. They would eventually swap Grievous for the recently captured Skywalker, and with Richelieu's death, the Gungans were able to reaffirm their cooperation with the surface-dwelling Naboo. The droid armies would then attempt an annexation of the Quilla system, north of Coruscant. Wolf, commander of the 104th Attack Battalion, would be sent out to intercept, but en route his acclamator was redirected to provide assistance to the mid-rim planet Orlean, following a series of devastating earthquakes. With the help of R2-D2 and C-3PO, they were able to get the Alina back up and running on their feet. The two droids were then taken to Jedi Master Adi Gallia and Commander Neo's Venator to be taken back to Coruscant. But the Venator was attacked by General Grievous's fleet, the ship destroyed and its crew taken prisoner. The droids managed to escape in a Y-wing to the planet Pataitite Batuna, where they were ultimately captured by pirates. The pirate vessel was then attacked by Grievous's fleet on its way back to Separatist space, where it is set upon by a massive Republic task force led by Plo Koon and Commander Wolf. They will then take Master Gallia, the liberated crew, and the droids back to Coruscant. The Third Systems army had already had an action-packed year, but one of the greatest battles of the war was soon upon them. The Umbarans had sided with the Confederacy. Coruscant couldn't risk such a powerful, militaristic and strategically important world being a launchpad for separatist actions. So they sent in the best reinforcements they could muster. The 501st Legion and a 7th Sky Corps would make up the vanguard of this assault, with smaller contingents of Sassy Tin and Pon Krell's battalions. The Republic bulldozed through the token separatist fleet that had been brought in to supply the Umbarans, although the space battle would continue for the duration of the ground campaign. The bulk of the Separatist capital ships would be taken out by the Venators and Acclamators. Unlike many previous campaigns of the war, the Republic would make extensive use of the Z-95 Headhunters, alongside its larger contingent of Arc 170s. As the Venators took on the remaining fleet in the skies, the Acclamators would begin descending into the atmosphere below. The 3 Acclamators would be equipped with as many LAATs as they could carry. Aboard one Acclamator, Kenobi would brief Skywalker and the clone officers before each taking their teams and boarding the gunships. The 501st lead LAAT had been modified with large floodlights, and all loaded with an AT-RT, the Republic's most versatile personal walker. As the gunships flooded out of the Acclamators, they would fly low to the ground, attempting to dodge the barrage of Umbaran anti-air fire. But as soon as they were in range, the dozens of AT-RTs would deploy from the gunships. Their task was to destroy the Umbarans' advanced hover tanks. Despite the tanks' mysterious weaponry, they were easily dispatched due to the AT-RT's far superior maneuverability. And despite multiple gunships being hit by flak fire, the majority of the gunships were able to descend in relative safety. On the ground, the walkers would clear a landing site for the gunships to drop in the 501st, but as the infantry stepped onto Umbaran soil, it was obvious the landing site was not fully cleared. The 501st's first objective on the road towards the capital was an imposing ridge, being used by the Umbarans to fire upon the Republic invasion force. For all their advanced and mysterious weaponry, the Umbaran militia was no match for the hardened 501st Legion. Steady progress forced the militia to retreat all the way up to their defensive positions upon the ridge, and so fierce was the 501st's advance, the Umbarans were pushed all the way back down the ridge too. The 501st's first objective objective had been captured, they would sit tight to await further information on the Umbaran's movements. To the south, Kenobi and Cody's 212th Attack Battalion would come across a much more stubborn Umbaran defense. Many clone units would be forced to ground, and a slow, grueling barrage advance began. The Umbarans clearly thought the larger Republic formation was a far greater threat. This thought process may have been correct for the old militaries of the Republic, where brute strength mattered above all else, but the clone army was filled with dynamic, individual and intelligent commanders at all ranks. It was not just its Jedi generals and senior commanders that set the agenda. This was nowhere more clear than in the 501st itself. Its Jedi General Anakin Skywalker had encouraged his troops to make their own decisions. Back on the ridge, the 501st had set up multiple sets of trenches looking down upon the battlefield below. Despite their temporary peace, they had limited time to rest before they had to continue their push towards the capital. But the Umbarans would not let them gain so much territory without a fight. Small units had snuck behind the Republic lines, getting into positions overlooking the trenches, and when the signal was given, they released dozens of milli-creep droids, which killed dozens of clones. And once the Umbarans opened fire with their blasters, Captain Rex attempted to organise a response. But with the enemy to their backs, they had no choice but to climb down from the ridge, while constantly under fire. Rex, seeing the possibility of being boxed in by the Umbarans, called in an airstrike on the ridge. Within minutes, Commander Oddball and his wingman obliterated the ridge, along with all the Umbarans upon it. Just one more example of Republic military dominance. After the 501st mopped up the remaining fighters, they prepared to continue on to the capital. But General Skywalker would suddenly be called back to Coruscant to meet with the Chancellor. Quell would take over the 501st while Skywalker was away. Rex was well aware of Quell's reputation, and although he didn't mention it in their initial meeting, he was also aware of Quell's ability to get clones killed. Quell took stock of the clones he had and decided to continue the push towards the capital. Despite coming under fire from native species, he demanded his men kept on moving. The road to the capital would result in several casualties for the 501st, harried all the way by the Umbarans and local fauna. But with Kenobi's battalions bogged down in the south, and despite Captain Rex's objections, Quell decided the only way to take the capital was a frontal attack. But it transpired into a quagmire. A hidden minefield caused chaos and confusion, killing yet more members of the already depleted 501st. ARC Trooper 5s would eventually find a route through, but no sooner did the forward companies come under attack by the Umbaran militia. Outnumbered and exposed in the open, Rex ordered a retreat. What originally was the 501st's blitzkrieg towards the capital had now led to them fighting the Umbaran counterattack, but the slow advance of Kenobi's battalions will come to their saviour. Clone intelligence had spotted a lightly defended airbase to the west, being used to supply the capital. If the 501st could reroute to the airbase, the Umbarans would be starved of resources and forced to surrender. Rex favoured a cautious approach to the airbase, scouting out and then drawing up a plan of attack. Quell, however, true to form, preferred a more direct assault. Despite his objections, Rex obliged and convinced the 501st to follow his lead. Splitting into 3 groups, they would push towards the airbase, coming under direct fire from impeding assault tanks, one of the Umbarans' most versatile vehicles, but the clones would prevail using rocket launchers and detonators. But the further they pushed, the more the Umbarans would push back. As they advanced further through the gorge that led to the airbase, they came under blistering fire from the Umbarans' most formidable fighting machine, the mobile heavy cannons. Despite their rockets and grenades, the cannons held firm. The 501st would meet their match, and were forced to go to ground. Without consulting Quell, Rex ordered 5s and hardcase to infiltrate the airbase, steal a pair of Umbaran fighters and use them to destroy the tanks. The plan went off without incident, and with their heavy armour destroyed, the Umbarans put up only a token response in defending the airbase, after which it shortly fell to the 501st. With their only resupply base lost, the Umbarans turned to the Separatist supply ships to access more weaponry. The Republic Navy above informed command on the planet's surface that there was no chance of breaking the Separatist fleet just yet, and that the supplies to the Umbarans would keep flowing. This weapon supply would consist of Separatist long-range missiles, The airbase and Kenobi's positions both came under fire from these missiles launched from the capital. Kenobi's battalions were slowly being pushed back by this barrage, but Quell advised Kenobi that the capital would have to be taken, despite the incoming fire. And so, despite Captain Rex's firm objections, the 501st was ordered to regroup and prepare to assault the capital with full force. Not too happy about being sidelined, Rex looked the other way, while Jesse Fives in Hardcase commandeered the captured Umbaran fighters and set off to destroy the supply ship. The Umbaran fighters were seen as friendlies to the oblivious droids, but when they entered the supply ship they found no easy way to blow up the reactors. Hardcase would sacrifice himself, allowing Fives and Jesse to escape, and in turn destroying the supply ship. With the supplies to the capital gone, Kenobi's troops began to push at ever greater speeds towards the capital. However, back at the airbase, after Jesse and Fives' return, Quell was furious at them, disobeying his orders, and ordered them to be court-martialed before changing his mind and ordering them to be executed. But when it came down to it, the clones disobeyed the execution order, and Jesse and Fives survived. Rex was then summoned by Quell to explain his actions, but before they could argue, scouts spotted Umbarans, supposedly in clone trooper armour, advancing upon the airbase. Rex led the 501st out of the airbase towards the suspected enemies. As they engaged, both sides traded casualties, but Rex would notice that the head of a dead enemy concealed under their helmet was very familiar, and as he lifted it up, it was a clone. Rex's suspicions were right all along. Quell had ordered the 501st and 212th against each other. The platoon commander of the 212th was Lieutenant Waxer. After telling Rex that it was Quell who had given the attack orders, he would die. Rex would then decide to take the unprecedented action of arresting Quell for treason against the Republic. With Arc Trooper 5's, his own loyal 501st troops, and those of the 212th who had been sent to kill them, they would surround Quell's position in the airbase, with Rex's small group ascending the tower. Quell didn't seem shocked by this turn of events. If anything, he was bemused. For too long, he had underestimated the clones' ability for empathy and independence. That flaw in his thinking would be very fatal. Telling the captain, "I'm surprised you were able to figure it out." For a clone, Quell must have realised the game was up. Force pushing the clones around him and jumping from the tower. Surrounded by 501st and 212th clones, he cut them all down. The clones pursued Quell into the forest, attacking small isolated groups one at a time. But whilst hiding from Rex's group, he projected his voice across the forest, acclaiming to the captain, "You should have listened to the Arc Trooper from the beginning, Captain." A close quarters fight would ensue, ending with Quell being attacked by the Vixus, one of the most unsuspecting and deadly of Umbara's flora. Despite Quell managing to defeat the plant, 501st Trooper Tup would stun him. Placing Quell in the brig of the airbase, Rex questioned Quell on his motives. And although Rex wouldn't know it at the time, Quell would reveal the rise of the Empire and the fall of the Republic. But why Rex never reported what Quell had said to him to the Jedi remains one of the greatest mysteries of the Umbaran campaign. Sergeant Appo then reported to Rex that General Kenobi's battalion had captured the capital and that the remaining Umbaran fighters were heading to the airbase, ordering his men to prepare for a full assault on their positions. But with the Umbarans closing in, Rex realised that if Quell was released, he would be an existential threat to the Republic forces on Umbara. He was left with no choice. As he met Quell in the brig and prepared to shoot him, he hesitated. Despite all that had occurred, his decade of training to be loyal to the Republic was stressed to its extremes. But from behind his back came a blaster bolt. Dogma, one of Quell's few supporters among the 501st, had done the job. Following Quell's death, Rex was informed that the last Umbaran holdouts had been eliminated, and that Kenobi's battalions had met all their objectives. Umbara was free of Separatist rule, and was once again under the Republic flag. Umbara would be followed by General Grievous' destruction of the Great Jedi Temple on Ledeve, leaving 2 Jedi dead. But the year was about to take a much darker turn in the Ahosic sector. On the planet of Kiros, an entire colony of Togrutas has gone missing. Before their disappearance, Master Yoda promised to send Republic troops to protect them, but they arrived too late and found the city deserted. Skywalker and Kenobi have brought along a company from both of their respective clone units, as well as their second-in-command. Landing away from the city centre, they established a foothold and been scouted out ahead on bark speeders. Rex commenting that the Separatist forces had never been shy about using civilians as human shields, clearly remembering Ryloth the year before. But there were none to be found. Instead, they were ambushed by commando droids on their own speeder bikes, and a fast-paced moving battle ensued, ending with the droids being destroyed. They then came up on the static droid roadblock with B-1s and AATs. Rex revealed his shoulder-mounted rocket launcher and took them out. The 501st troops would establish a perimeter around the city centre, from where they could clean up the rest of the droids. But inside the governor's tower, the Separatist commander, Darth Dinar, refused to surrender. Cody told Kenobi that Dinar wanted to see him, and him, alone. Kenobi met Dinar in the tower, and as hand-to-hand combat ensued between the two of them, Dinar revealed that he had planted several bombs throughout the city, which had the capacity to kill any locals hiding around the city. So while Kenobi bided as much time as possible, Skywalker and Ahsoka set out to defuse the bombs, and with some setbacks due to stronger than anticipated droid resistance, the bombs were gone. Dinar was chased by Kenobi to his ship, arrested by Tano and Skywalker, and swiftly revealed the location of the missing Togruta colonists, Zygerria, at the Grand Slave Auction. Kyros may now be in Republic hands, but the Jedi can't just let the civilians be a pawn of a revived Zygerrian Empire. The team would then set off to Zygerria, where their disguise would be found out, and after a short struggle they would be shipped off as slaves to the prison on Kadavo, run by Keeper Agrus. The Republic captives eventually located the Togrutas, and with the timely arrival of Plo Koon and Admiral Coburn, they were able to rescue them. Kenobi was unable to kill Agrus due to him being unarmed. It would have been against the Jedi code, but Captain Rex is not bound by such ecclesiastical restraint, proclaiming, "I'm no Jedi," then skewering the slaver to death. It was a slightly more peaceful atmosphere at the Republic Confederacy Peace Conference on Mandalore. The planet was chosen due to its formal position of neutrality in the Clone Wars, but in reality, its government lay far more in the Republic camp. But the talks collapse, and it seems that a diplomatic solution is nowhere in sight. Back on Coruscant, Kenobi will fake his own death to go undercover as a bounty hunter, helping stop an assassination attempt on Chancellor Palpatine. But despite these political upsets, the war on the Republic's frontiers raged on. General Grievous would be sent to Dathomir to enact revenge on the Night Sisters on behalf of Count Dooku, ultimately leading Savage Opress to finding the thought to be dead, Darth Maul, culminating in Kenobi and Ventress dueling Savage and Maul in the orbit of Raydonia, the unlikely pair managing to escape. The emergence of an Onderon civil war, where the ruling monarchy was backed by the Separatists, gave the Republic a chance to test their new strategy of helping locals fend off the Separatists and their proxies without explicit clone army assistance. They sent a small team of advisors to help the rebels, initially led by Seal Gerrera, but following her death during the battle, passing to Saw Gerrera. With the expertise of Captain Rex in the art of fighting droids, the rebels were able to achieve victory, with the Separatist-backed monarchy being deposed and their droid allies leaving in defeat. But despite the victory, the Republic was still cautious about training proxies to essentially be terrorists against established government simply for aligning with Dooku. With Onderon under the Republic flag, Kenobi's fleet would take some time on patrol duty. He was preparing to send Commander Cody and a small team to rescue a group of stranded Jedi younglings, but this had to be called off when General Grievous located his fleet and launched a massive surprise attack. Kenobi's 3 Venators stood no chance against Grievous's force, and the cyborg general soon began boarding actions against the Republic ships. On his capital ship, the Negotiator, Kenobi and Cody ran for the escape pods as it became obvious the ship was lost. Luckily, most of the 7th Sky Corps aboard the Venators was able to escape. Kenobi set the ship to self-destruct once the escape pods were out of range, a necessary move to buy his troops as much time as possible, but leading to another great Venator being destroyed. Fortunately, Hondo Anoka, whose base on Florrum had been attacked by Grievous, eventually was able to get the younglings back to Kenobi on a new Venator. Earlier in the year, the disappearance of Captain Gregor on Sarish had led to the Special Operations Brigade, of which he, as a commando, was a part of, to assume he had died during the bloody battle. But he had survived, and was found by a team of droids led by Colonel Gascon. He would help the droids off-world, despite himself being left behind. The droids boarded a Venator hijacked by the Separatists, who were trying to attempt to ram it
into the Republic space station Valour in the Corrida system. The station was currently being used to host the Republic strategy conference to discuss the gains made throughout 20 BBY and the steps that will be taken in the following year to win the war. On board were many of the Republic's highest ranking admirals, clone commanders, and Jedi generals, including but not limited to Admirals Wilhelm Tarkin, Barton Coburn, Wolfie Lauren, clone commanders Cody, Neo, and Wolf, as well as Jedi generals Mace Windu, Kenobi, and Skywalker. If the Separatists had succeeded with their plan, the cost to the Republic would be unimaginable, but it was foiled when R2-D2 detonated the bomb early, causing much damage and debris, but no loss of life. As the final act of 20 BBY, the Separatists had not succeeded. But all the attendees of that conference knew that the next year of the Clone Wars would be far more deadly, wide-ranging, and consequential than anything they had faced thus far. 20 BBY had been a long year of struggle for the Republic, constantly on the back foot and with a hostile domestic political scene to boot, but they were preparing for a great push that would decide not just the fate of the Clone Wars, but the entire galaxy for decades to come. The previous year, 20 BBY, had seen the Separatists really, for the first time in the Clone Wars, being held back and in some instances, mainly in terms of their proxies, losing worlds to the Republic's clone armies. Republic Command therefore planned the next year's campaigns to exploit these victories and press home the advantage. But forces outside their control would put a spanner in those works. Maul had now returned. He and Savage Press would make a series of poorly thought out alliances to attempt to create a base of power, then strike back against Palpatine and the Jedi. His first target, Hondo Anoka's pirates on Florrum. But they weren't interested, and this venture only led to Jedi interference. Instead, the pair would assemble an underworld army to attempt to put Pre Vizsla, the rogue leader of the Mandalorian sect Death Watch, on the Mandalorian throne as a puppet, controlled of course by them. The criminals would stage a false flag operation, pretending to act as bandits, showing the ineffectiveness of the pacifist new Mandalorian administration. Then Death Watch could swoop in and save the day. The plan was flawless, and within 24 hours Duchess Satine was in prison and Pre Vizsla had asserted his rule of Mandalore. But the Mandalorian leader was not all comfortable with being a puppet ruler to a higher regime, so he took Maul and Press into custody, a move he would turn out to regret, as when the two escaped, Maul killed Vizsla, splitting the Death Watch and taking control of Mandalore. The arrival of Kenobi would prompt him to get revenge by killing Satine Kryze, although Maul's triumph was spoiled by Palpatine's killing of Savage. Savage's abilities would be sorely missed by Maul in the challenging year that lay ahead. But Maul and his small Mandalorian enclave would have to be dealt with later, because the CIS had begun to launch several large and desperate attacks across the Republic's frontiers, striking as far as Cato Nemoidia. But Skywalker and Tano would have to return to Coruscant following the bombing on the Jedi Temple's hangar bay, leaving Cato Nemoidia in the hands of other Republic units. But without the 501st, the planet would soon fall into Separatist hands. This latest attack on the capital was ultimately blamed on Ahsoka herself. Despite being acquitted at trial, it later led to her becoming disillusioned with the Jedi Order and leaving in disgust. But Skywalker could not let the loss of his Padawan consume him, for the war raged on, with Admiral Trench's attack on the vital Republic world of Ringo Vinda. The Republic would cobble together any forces they could find. Fresh from the Battle of Cato Nemoidia, the infamous 501st Legion, well equipped, well led, and battle hardened from 3 years of frontline combat. Being stationed in the core worlds, they were an obvious choice for a quick reaction force. As always, they would be led by the Jedi General, Anakin Skywalker, and his second in command, Captain Rex. The two have by this point in the Clone Wars established themselves as one of the most effective Jedi clone pairings in the GAR. Rex would also request his friend ArcTrooper 5 to join them during the campaign, knowing his experience in close quarters combat would prove very valuable. For the space battle, they could rely on their trusted Fleet Admiral, Wolfie Lauren, one of the Republic's most experienced naval commanders. He would once more keep the sky safe while the 501st were on the ground. The 9,000 clones of the 501st would not be capable of taking the massive space station surrounding the planet by themselves, and with Kenobi's 7th Sky Corps committed to other campaigns, the Republic would send Jedi Generals Tip La and Tip Lee, along with their second-in-command, Commander Doom, bringing the invasion force to around 18,000 infantry. Here is the breakdown of those troops involved. This does not take account of the thousands of naval crew and pilots who fought in the massive space battle. With more than 20 ships of the line, it would be one of the largest of the war so far. Such was the necessity in retaking Ringo Vinda. Trench knew the usual Republic strategy of amassing troops at a single point and flooding in to the area to create a rout amongst the droid forces. Such tactics had worked well at the Second Battle of Geonosis against the droid factory, and of course the assault against the capital city of Umbara. He had no way of predicting, however, where the Republic would attack here, so he hedged his bets, spreading his droids evenly around the station. He had no option but to wait. He would be ably assisted by the super tactical droid, Commander Kraken. As Trench predicted, the Republic hit hard and fast, rushing into the winding and narrow corridors, making very good use of the combat shields, which proved highly effective in this very niche battle environment. The Republic forces either knew they would need them or got lucky and had them on hand. The constant clearing of corridors one at a time made the Republic's progress slow but steady. Trench began sending in more reinforcements to the front, but seeing that the Republic was clearing the space station in a clockwise direction, he sent in his commando droids, extremely dangerous and superbly agile in these narrow corridors. They kept the Republic on their feet and significantly slowed them down, but Trench knew his enemy commanders and knew he was in a race against time. He built up a significant droid reserve, B1s, B2s, commando droids and B2 RPs, positioning them just behind his command room overlooking the supply area. If his predictions were correct, this would be his best chance at giving the Republic forces a bloody nose. The two clone units, which had been largely separated throughout much of their advance, would combine at a central admin room, exchanging some troops between them to balance out their next advance towards Trench's main position. Knowing the Republic forces are on the way, Trench sends in some of his reserves, and as the clones keep pushing towards the large room, they are constantly outflanked by droids emerging from smaller corridors. As they reach the main room, each of the three groups enters in a separate door, giving a united advancing front to stop any outflanking as they push through the room. Not long into the advance, they begin to get bogged down, and many clones are forced to take up stationary firing positions, with the Jedi blocking the incoming fire. But at that crucial moment, 501st Clone Trooper Tup, one of Rex's most reliable troopers, shoots Jedi General Tip La in the head. Looking back, we all know that it was an early execution of Order 66, but for the next and last few months of the Clone Wars, the reasoning was a complete mystery. Everyone around the incident is put into complete shock. ARC Trooper 5's arrests Tup, but it doesn't help that the Republic forces have lost all their momentum. Skywalker orders the Force back. Trench 2 is in complete confusion. He orders his droids to continue a steady push against the Republic forces, and despite the clones' best efforts, over the next coming days they are slowly pushed out of Ringo Vinda until they are forced to withdraw back into the safety of their fleet, and eventually withdraw from the system entirely. Tup would end up dead, and when 5 escorted him back to Kamino for testing, he would learn a terrible truth about the origins of the Clone Wars. But the supposedly neutral banking clan had kicked up some dust. Count Dooku had blackmailed the bank's new head, Rush Clovis, into raising interest rates on Republic war loans and not the Separatists. The two warring sides would send representatives to Scipio, the bank's headquarters world, to discuss steps going forward. The Republic's representative, Padme Amidala, would be escorted by veteran Coruscant Guard Commander Thrawn. Thrawn had brought along 12 LAAT gunships and a Consular-class cruiser to Scipio, and although no fighting was expected, Thrawn kept his troops on high alert, and had the cruiser's radar continually scanning. And as the night crept over them, the radar screen lit up red. 1 ship, 2 ships, 3 ships.
In fact, it was a Separatist invasion force. Thrawn grabbed his Z6 rotary cannon, which he named the Hammer, and alongside 2 of his troopers with rocket launchers, ran out onto the landing pad to alert Amidala. But as he ran down the cruiser's ramp, droid hyena bombers swooped in, hitting the gunships as they prepared to take off, and striking multiple hits on the cruiser, hitting it in just the right region to break its structural integrity, allowing it to be dragged down into the abyss, along with all its crew. One droid bomber was shot down by a rocket launcher, but overall the guard had no chance of repelling the incoming fire. Thrawn and his few troops on the landing pad tried to rush the city gates, but were cut off by HMP gunships which deployed B2 super battle droids and BX commando droids. Before they could turn around, they were cut off in the rear as well. Thrawn and his last remaining 5 troops formed circle and were gradually engulfed. One by one, the clones were cut down, until only Commander Thrawn remained. His Z6 was overheating until he was shot under the left shoulder. He then swung the hammer, taking down 6 droids, then firing at another, meleeing 2 more, shooting 1 more, before being shot point blank in the chest, then again and again, before being finished off by a final shot from a Commando droid's E5 blaster. His last words before he fell perhaps best encapsulated the esprit de corps of the clone army. For the Republic. Thrawn's death would not be in vain. The Republic fleet had been alerted of the Separatist attack, and the task force of the 501st Legion was en route to counterattack. Upon seeing the Republic task force, Dooku's forces began retreating from Scipio, leaving Rush Clovis to the mercy of General Skywalker. All part of the Count's plan, of course. Skywalker's 3 Venators engaged the small Separatist fleet in orbit, while the 501st gunships began their descent to the surface. The veteran 501st pilot Lieutenant Hawk Z-95 squadrons providing air cover as the gunships came into land. Rex and the 501st would hold a landing pad as Skywalker infiltrated the complex and rescued Padme, Rush Clovis falling to his death during the rescue. Following the conclusion and cleanup on Scipio, the Banking clan decided to dismantle the entire clan itself, and hand all its assets not to the Republic or Confederacy, but to the Supreme Chancellor's office. In hindsight, not exactly a subtle move. With the Naboo Senator Padme Amidala engaged with several political appointments, it was left to the Gungan representative Jar Jar Binks to carry out many of her duties involving diplomacy across the galaxy. One of these was on Zardosa, where he and Mace Windu helped rescue the Bardotan Queen, Julia, from a dark side cult. On Obadiah, Kenobi and Skywalker would find out that Count Dooku played a pivotal role in the creation of their clone army. The Jedi had always been skeptical of why and how Sifo Dyas had ordered the army and where the funds came from. But if this truth got out, it would cause the public to lose complete confidence in both the clone army and the Jedi, so they decided to hide the truth, even from the Chancellor. The Jedi couldn't just surrender and give up the fight, even knowing the peril they were now in. Their only option was to fight on. Following her ordeal on Scipio, Padme would head to Batuu to investigate a suspected droid production facility when Skywalker showed up to assist. The Republic team was assisted when they bumped into a mysterious Chiss captain. With the Confederacy still being gradually pushed out of the Mid-Rim, they looked to hold on to their worlds across the frontier. One of these was Mahrain, a loyal Republic member world. Dooku originally hoped to convince its population to join the CIS peacefully, as he had done with so many other worlds, but when they refused, he sent in his droid army. The natives sent out a distress signal to the Republic, which in kind sent clone troopers under General Chubor, but the Republic arrived too late. The capital city was already in ruins, and thousands of refugees began fleeing the planet, and despite a direct call to Dooku from General Chubor, his droids spared no one and massacred all the transports leaving the planet's surface. Effectively, the Mahrain people ceased to exist. This would become one of the worst massacres of the Clone Wars, and subsequently was known as the Mahrain Genocide. Following this devastating Republic loss, the Jedi Council decided that they were needed to take out Dooku once and for all. They dispatched Jedi Master Quinlan Vos, who, on his own initiative, teamed up with Asajj Ventress, but during the fight he would be captured, Ventress narrowly escaping. Despite Maul's new Mandalorian empire, he was still at the mercy of the galactic powers, suffering defeat at the Spire and Zanbar against Separatist armies, but he regained some glory with a decisive victory at Ord Mantell, where Maul was able to capture Dooku and Grievous, despite heavy civilian casualties. Mace Windu and Kenobi, hearing of this egg basket of enemy commanders, led a force to attempt to capture them all on Vizsla Keepo 9, but the uneasy allies were able to escape the Jedi. This campaign, known in retrospect as the Campaign against the Shadow Collective, would end only following the Second Battle of Dathomir, where the Sith alliance was broken, following the death of Mother Talzin, and the retreat of Maul and his Mandalorians back to their stronghold. This loose end was resolved when the Jedi were able to rescue Quinlan Vos from Dooku's capital ship. Vos would be accused of treason by the Jedi upon returning to Coruscant. They feared he had strayed too far to the dark side and had begun feeding Republic military operations to the CIS. But ultimately, he was forgiven, perhaps in part because the Republic was about to need all the generals it could rally. During the last 5 months, the Republic had made many small gains, slowly inching Grievous's armies from the Mid-Rim and taking control of many vital production worlds. It seemed odd to many how carelessly the Confederacy was abandoning worlds, almost without a fight, but the Republic was playing straight into Grievous's plans, with their frontier sector armies pushed to the extremes, attempting to cover as much territory as quickly as possible. Their front line had become ragged and exposed. They had been blind to Grievous's last reserves, which he rushed into several key sectors, threatening highly important Republic worlds such as Anaxis, Matalorn, Kolla, Onderon, Boz-Pity and Tolukamai, with Grievous sending much needed reinforcements to bog down droid armies on Maigito and Cato Nemoidia. The Republic simply ran out of clones in their frontier sector armies. On worlds such as Maigito, where the 21st Nova Corps had been engulfed in hard fighting for most of the war, they dispatched elements of the 501st Legion to bolster its ranks. This seemed to work so well that they prepared their own great assault to drive back the droid onslaught. Out of the 20 sector armies of the Grand Army of the Republic, 6 were based in the north, 8 in the south. Each of these groups were frontier forces, all of them already engaged in combat, many severely depleted. So the Republic would roll the dice. The 6 sector armies based in the core worlds would have to go in, and fast. Just over 1 million clones in all. The Second Army, under Regal, containing the great 327th Star Corps, veterans of the First Battle of Geonosis nearly 4 years earlier, under General Aayla Secura and Marshal Commander Bly. The Third Army, under General Luminara Unduli, containing the specialist 9th Assault Corps, under one of the Republic's greatest tacticians, Marshal Commander Gree. The Fourth Army, partly already deployed to Maigito, under General Kierimundi and the fearless Marshal Commander Bakara, containing the battle-hardened Galactic Marines. Also based in the core sectors, the veteran 91st Recon Corps, famed for their role on Ryloth 2 years prior, now under the command of General Stas Ali and Marshal Commander Neo, following the death of Commander Pons. Along with Mace Windu's 187th Legion, and the Flame Trooper Corps, and the 5th and 6th Sector Armies, jointly under the command of General Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the indispensable Marshal Commander Cody, containing the 7th Sky Corps and the 501st Legion, by far the most experienced, gallant and victorious soldiers the Republic could muster. This would be the greatest, most desperate gamble of Republic forces thus far in the Clone Wars. If it succeeded, the droid armies would be beaten, and Republic victory all but ensured. If they lost, the core worlds would be exposed to attack, and Coruscant, with the exemption of the Coruscant Guard, defenseless. So began what would become known as the Outer Rim Sieges. But the Republic couldn't mobilise fast enough. Dooku sent Admiral Trench, his best naval commander, to take the vital Republic shipyards on Anaxis. Out of the Republic's mobilised forces is a reserve fleet consisting of elements of Kenobi's 5th and 6th Sector armies and Windu's 187th Legion. They are needed elsewhere, but Anaxis can't be lost, so they are sent into the fray. The plan was to send these Republic reinforcements into battle as soon as possible. General Windu and his 187th would go into action on the ground, with Skywalker in the skies, attempting to hold Trench's massive fleet at bay. But the Republic just kept losing ground, and without plausible reasons. Captain Rex recognised the tactics used by Trench, but not as a result of his years fighting the droid armies. Instead, he realised they were his own tactics. He and Cody got permission to launch a raid behind enemy lines to assess how Trench had managed to beat the captain's tactics. After all, Rex is one of the best battlefield tacticians in the clone army, and if they could beat him, it would spell disaster for everyone else. They set their sights on a cyber center, and with the help of the experimental Clone Force 99, made up of defective clones with desirable mutations, they were able to get to the complex. And the signal they found being beamed to Trench in orbit originated from Skako Minor, but far more troubling for Rex, the signal read the numbers 1409, the ID number of the thought-to-be-dead ARC Trooper Echo, who was supposed to have been killed the year before, but Rex believed he must be alive, and without permission from the Jedi Council, the team nonetheless rescued him from Skako Minor. Back on Anaxis with his insider knowledge, Echo was able to bring about the Republic victory, coupled with Skywalker's killing of Admiral Trench and the subsequent destruction of the Separatist fleet. The Battle of Anaxis had proved a resounding triumph for the clone army. However, as these elite forces moved out of Anaxis, they couldn't help but notice how depleted the core worlds were, and just how spread out the most experienced Jedi generals and clone commanders had become. The Republic's frontiers now consisted of several separate theatres, but it seemed to be working. Reports of battlefield results on Mygeetos, Alukamai and Cato Nemoidia proved that this last push may put an end to the war. Kenobi's forces would now be redirected to Yabana. The 5th Fleet set out in haste, especially now as news of mass civilian suffering had been verified. It was a battle reminiscent of Cristophsis 3 years before. The 501st and 7th Sky Corps, under their veteran officers and Jedi generals, both played their part in the great and desperately needed Republic victory, but the feeling in the air wasn't the same as years gone by on Ryloth, Kamino, Umbara or Geonosis. Something about the state of the war had put all of them on edge. Following victory, the fleet awaited their next orders, but an old friend requested help. The Mandalorian exiles, now joined by Ahsoka Tano, had hoped for Republic support in taking back Mandalore, now ruled by Maul, with an iron fist. But as Kenobi was contemplating turning the fleet around, he received disastrous news from Coruscant. Grievous had seen the black hole left by the Republic's reserve armies, now fighting on the frontiers. He assembled the greatest Separatist fleet ever seen, 1,000 ships of the line, led by Grievous's flagship the Invisible Hand, with auxiliary flagships Patriot First, Prosperous and Profusion. Well, this put Kenobi in a difficult position, torn both ways between defending the capital and defeating his old enemy, Maul. He made a fatal compromise, promoting Captain Rex to Senior Commander and giving him a division of the 501st under his sole command, with Tano as an advisor to take Mandalore. He, Skywalker and the rest of the 5th Fleet would race back to Coruscant, hoping to reach the capital and protect the Chancellor in person. Defending Coruscant was its home defense fleet, under the command of Admiral Honor Salima, with elements of the Open Circle Armada now arriving in force and being significantly bolstered by Kenobi's arrival with the 5th Fleet. In this desperate hour, a lack of experienced pilots demanded that many ground units, including the 501st, be forced into space combat. Luckily for the Republic, many veteran clones had remained on Coruscant despite the push in the Outer Rim, including Commander Oddball, who helped lead starfighter forces in the naval battle, and the great Captain Fordo of Munilist 10 fame, helping defend the Federal District of Galactic City as the droid army began landing troops in force. Their target The Chancellor. Grievous was able to abduct the Chancellor despite Jedi General Shaak Ti's efforts. Grievous and Dooku would hold Palpatine on the invisible hand. With their fleet arriving in force, Kenobi and Skywalker were the only two Jedi available to rescue Palpatine, with Oddball's squadron helping clear a path to the Separatist flagship. The two boarded the ship, but when they found the Chancellor, Dooku arrived, knocking Kenobi unconscious and almost getting the upper hand on Skywalker. However, fueled by his rage, Skywalker was able to come out on top, and with encouragement from Palpatine, Skywalker beheaded, and therefore killed, Count Dooku, the head of state of the Confederacy. It was then that the Invisible Hand was caught in a broadside slugging match with the Venator Gorala of Kenobi's own Fifth Fleet. The Invisible Hand's captain, Lushros Define, had not spotted the home fleet's Strike Fleet 5 under Lieutenant Commander North Vida surrounding the ship, which ultimately succumbed to the immense amount of fire and began rapidly descending towards Coruscant's surface. But as they tried to escape the vessel, Grievous captured the trio. This would be the first time Skywalker and Grievous met, but Grievous was no match for the pair, and was forced to flee, and despite a rough landing on the surface of the capital, the Chancellor was now safe. With the loss of their leader, many irreplaceable capital ships and commanders, the Separatist fleet was forced to retreat back to their few remaining sectors in the Outer Rim. The great last roll of the dice for the Confederacy of independent systems had failed. They would never be able to threaten Coruscant again. In the meantime, Commander Rex had reached Mandalore and begun his assault. With 3 Venators packed to the rafters with LAATs and ATTEs, his 332nd Division and the Mandalorian Exiles, they began their assault from the west, aiming to take control of the docks to get their troops in fast and find the Maul before he could escape. As the gunships deployed from the cruisers and entered the atmosphere, they encountered higher than expected resistance from Maul's Mandalorians. But with the overwhelming supremacy in numbers and firepower, they easily reached and cleared the docks. With the docks secured, the clones could land in force and quickly overpower the Dome City's outer defences. Commander Gar Saxon would lead the defence of the upper levels, but his forces beaten back and with little support from Prime Minister Almec, he retreats into the Undercity. Bo-Katan heads for the throne room. Almec puts up a futile fight but ultimately reveals that Maul was expecting Kenobi. Captain Vaughn and his 332nd Company had by this time pursued Gar Saxon into the Undercity, and with Tano's arrival, they began their hunt for them. But they encountered Maul, Captain Vaughn being killed. Maul now had Tano trapped, pondering aloud why Kenobi had sent her. But before he could reveal who Darth Sidious was, Rex and his men arrive and scatter Maul's Mandalorians, causing them to flee. The commanders met back on the surface, in the throne room which they had turned into a temporary command center. There, via hologram, Tano asked Kenobi who this Darth Sidious was. All he knew was that Sidious was the orchestrator of the Clone Wars, something he had learned from Dooku at the start of the war. But with Dooku dead, the only avenue of finding out more information would be through Maul. In the Undercity, a scouting party of clones had been attacked, with ARC Trooper Jesse being taken prisoner by Maul. Maul then had Prime Minister Almec killed. As a prisoner, he was now a liability to Maul's plans. But Maul had one last objective. He may not be able to keep his throne on Mandalore, although that was never his true intention. The reason he wanted Kenobi was for him to bring along Skywalker and stop Sidious's great plan in its tracks. He waited in the throne room for Tano, and confided in her the true story of the Clone Wars, but she didn't believe him. After an intense duel, Maul escaped, and was ultimately captured before he could flee Mandalore. His last-ditch Mandalorian counterattack had now also failed. The Jedi didn't know it yet, but by capturing and muting Maul, they had sealed their fates. Mandalore was now back under the leadership of Clan Kryze, but in reality it was under Republic control. Rex and Ahsoka would depart Mandalore with Maul in custody, headed back to Coruscant. By this time, Kenobi had begun his assault on Utapau. The 7th Sky Corps engaged in vicious fighting with Grievous' last droid armies. Tano now informed the Jedi Council of her progress on Mandalore, but she didn't reveal to them what Maul had said about General Skywalker, who at this point had been sent to spy on the Chancellor. Kenobi had now killed General Grievous on Utapau, the last remaining Separatist Council members escaping to safety on Mustafar. It seemed to all informed that the Clone Wars had finally come to an end. The droid armies pushed beyond their strongholds, the price of war too high to continue, their leadership dead and on the run, and above all, the clone army widely dispersed, its best Jedi generals pushing forward on all fronts. The Jedi thought they had come out of another galactic rift the victors, but there was one last bump in the road. The Chancellor had not given up his emergency powers. He had slowly consolidated the power of the banks, the courts and the Senate in his own hands. The only troops on Coruscant were now his most loyal soldiers, and the best generals in the Outer Rim. The Jedi had played his game perfectly, every move exact and precise. There was now nothing they could do. Palpatine's great proclamation in 22 BBY to not allow the galaxy to split in two was an honest one. There were never two sides to the Clone Wars. It was all a lie, a sham, and in the end, the #1 enemy in the eyes of the galaxy was the Jedi. Their so-called chosen one's loyalty was not to them, but the Chancellor, the only person he trusted. And when they finally discover the truth, they rush in, sabers drawn. Too late. On all those worlds where the Jedi had sent their best generals and commanders, one phrase rang out.
Order 66.
Order 66 may have lived large in popular myth and legend, but for every betrayal and romantic last stand, there was an undeniable weight above it all. The Jedi Order had brought their own destruction upon themselves. 13 years after he was elected Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic, Palpatine had achieved complete autocratic control. He had outlasted all his contemporary rivals and consolidated the galaxy's wealth and power in his hands alone. Only one man had emerged to rule the galaxy. The Emperor, Sheev Palpatine. Hello, I am Rhino. Thank you very much for watching this project, which I've spent far too long on. If you could subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated, and if you want to see future projects, you can always join my Discord. This is, of course, a canon series of events of the years 22 to 19 BBY, which, although I call it 4 years, is in total 3. It just covers the span of 4 years. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until some of my future projects come around, I'll see you around.